I have to wait. Okay, now we're ready. Sorry about that. We actually called to order the meeting at 6 p.m. because we went into a closed session to talk about some personnel issues. So now we're here back to start the public meeting. We will start this evening with a public hearing on bond issuance under Maryland Local Government Infrastructure Program to finance renovation of the library and community center and roadway and streetscape improvements, just to make sure everybody knows what we're talking about. With the adoption of our FY 2018 budget, the council took the first step towards authorizing an increase in the city's debt by $9 million for costs associated with the library and related construction at the community center, and to match grants for major transportation projects. The city plans to issue a $2 million transportation bond with a 5-year term to pay for the city's match for 2 major street projects. 15-year term to pay for the city's, excuse me, I made a mistake. 15-year term to pay for the city's match for 2 major projects, the Ethan Allen Gateway Project and the Flower Avenue Green Street Project, and a $7 million library bond with a 30-year term to pay for construction and renovations at the community center. So our next step, pursuant to Section 4-230 of the Housing and Community Development article of the Annotated Code of Maryland, as amended, are to hold a public hearing to consider an ordinance authorizing the public debt, followed by the first and second reading of the ordinances. And so tonight is our public hearing. Some folks signed up, and if you didn't get a chance to sign up, you will have a chance to speak after I call all those who did sign up. Just as a reminder to folks, when I call your name, please come to the podium, state your name and where you live, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. The first is Miriam Shapiro? Yeah. Shapiro. Look like a Z. You got it. Go ahead. You got it.
Okay. I'm here to support the library renovation. My husband, Ray Scannell, and I have lived in Tacoma Park at 118 Park Avenue since 1986. And we, as well as our 2 now grown kids, have been active library users throughout that entire period. I'm also a member of the Friends of the Library Board. I'm a member of the board because I believe that the library is one of the key institutions that make Tacoma Park a wonderful, special place. And because it is independent of the Montgomery County system, it's able to focus its mission on the unique needs of the Tacoma Park community, including its diversity, its concern for children, its welcoming support of immigrant communities. That said, it's been 27 years since the last library renovation. As others have noted, the building is in dire shape. Just as importantly, the library needs to be renovated in such a way that it continues to be relevant in the resources it offers our community into the 21st century and beyond, hopefully. From books to reading and programming space to new media and research technology. The city management has worked hard to ensure that the library renovation will take place in a financially responsible way, and I'm confident that it will continue to handle the renovation project with close and careful attention to cost, quality of work, and protection of the environment. And so for all those reasons, I would like to just, again, express my support for the renovation. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Walter Mulberry. Sorry if I pronounce your names wrong.
That's better than most. So I'm Walter Mulberry. I live at 7010 Woodland Avenue in Tacoma Park. My wife and now 2 children. We've lived in Tacoma Park since 1984. We've used the library for all of those years and certainly enjoyed it. But as we've spoken among ourselves, it's never been a place we really wanted to stay. We go get books and we go home. And so as I've gone into other libraries and I've thought, wow, this is a great space. And it's time for us to renovate our library so we have a great space. We have great programming, great books. it's just time to renovate it. And so I certainly hope you'll support the bond issue. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Karen Anderson?
Yep, Karen Anderson. I live on Woodland Avenue, and I know the renovation is going to take place, but all the libraries that I know have been torn down or turned into bookstores now. And I have to tell you, the ambience of the Silver Spring Library is sort of sad. I mean, you know, the kids have to go up all these stairs and through all this traffic and everything. And I think that, and I've lived here 50 years, and I always liked the little ambience of the library. And the times have changed was really personified for me the other day when I saw a kid on a bicycle texting. I think you have no idea. So anyway, I know that there are good reasons to renovate, but I almost think there should be 2 libraries and maybe, you know, one over on New Hampshire so the kids don't go so far.
Thank you. Mr. Huberman?
Good evening, folks. Thanks for the time. Regarding the bond, the bonds that the council is considering, and in light of the city council priority of fiscally sustainable government, and in the interest of full disclosure, I request for myself and the other tax-paying residents of the city the fiscal impact study and/or spreadsheet that the council members used to assess the impact of the newly acquired debt from the bonds and the opinion of each council member regarding the debt reparation. Since the city manager reported in the 2017 proposed budget document that, quote, debt payments that had been about $360,000 in fiscal year 17 will become over $900,000 per year for the next few years, or almost triple, I suppose that finance was directed by the council to prepare such a schedule of reparations and their relationship to projected income. If, as the mayor alluded in a past council meeting, there's a more general concern on the impact of the debt and increasing property taxes especially, I further request, number 1, the publication and release of the appropriate spreadsheet to the residents, number 2, the projected increase or decrease in property taxes, number 3, what alternate means are being considered to mitigate any potential increase in taxes. I, for one, would suggest the House budget system for determining a course of action. Consider income and coordinate expenses without assuming any automatic increases in my income. Personally, if the council considers the library renovation, which has more than doubled from its first projections, to be the most important bond expenditure, as do I, then fund that, but postpone the 2 road projects and the atrium work. If you want the library, you can't always have everything you want. I certainly haven't been able to solve that one. If Flower Avenue is far too along, then at least postpone Ethan Allen and postpone the atrium work, which is still lingering from past council actions. You know, the community center is supposed to be finished, and we're still working on it. Then there's a $20,000 override because somebody can't count how many doors are in the building. Finally, remember there's an election this fall, and the wishes and conclusions of this council could change with the next. Thank you.
Ms. Michui?
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Mayor, Council. Mary Jane Michui, Ward 2, Parents of Special Needs Adults founder. I believe, like Karen said, I think there should be 2 libraries, but not half the amount spent. I think $7.2 million, plus we're going to have to pay the interest over 30 years. That's extremely high. And I'm low income, and my son's Social Security just got cut off the other day, so I'm really low income now, extremely low income. So I like the library. I think it's cute. I mean, it's charming. It's cute. I love the mosaic that people made outside, the hominess. I don't like what I've seen of the libraries, newer libraries. I'm scared it's going to lose its uniqueness. Why don't we just spend $1 million in renovating the electricity in the bathroom and a quiet room? The thing I really would like most in that library is a quiet room. because I've been there in the past many times, and I couldn't concentrate on studying because of people talking, including the librarians sometimes. And I just wondering, just have a quiet room, and also, like Karen suggested, New Hampshire Avenue, spend a couple million and have a small library there for the people on that side of New Hampshire. They need a library too, and crossing New Hampshire is really a feat. I had to cross New Hampshire when we first moved to Tacoma Park because we didn't have a car for 3.5 years. Believe me, 410 in New Hampshire crossing is really, really difficult. I don't think I could do it now safely. And also about the other things, I don't know about what the renovation is for the atrium entails. I do concerned about the money spent on Flower Avenue and the 410 project, which is only a couple of blocks from where I live, and concerned about the money spent. I've noticed on Flower Avenue, they always have these horrible places where the roads were, messed up. Why don't you fix the roads on Flower Avenue? The roads are in horrible shape. Why don't you first fix it? Sometimes I feel like people want to fix the icing, but they won't address the cake. And I'd rather have fix the road first on Flower Avenue instead of just ignoring it. And maybe help a little bit pedestrians. Sometimes when I cross there near Arliss, where the Giant is, there's pedestrians. I see it. Other day I was there on Sunday, and there was a blind man trying to cross the street, and a couple of people in wheelchairs. So thank you.
Next we have Troy Jacobs. Nope, you turned yourself off.
I am Troy Jacobs, Ward 5 resident, and live 8010 Flower Avenue. I've lived there for 10 years, and I want to thank the City Council and staff for their ongoing support of infrastructure improvements like Flower Avenue, Green Street. Now, the thing is, having lived there for 10 years, we have been talking and had to do lots of research to actually prove and document what is needed on Flower Avenue. And I think one of the good things that has happened as a process is that we have actually been successful at crowdsourcing and bringing in public and private funds for this project. To move it from concept to reality, though, the final step is the city bond approval. The residents of Ward 5 have been waiting for years for safety, traffic calming, and environmental improvements on this road. Particularly hazardous is for the residents in the more denser parts of the road, which are correlated with poor sections of Flower Avenue. While my own property will be negatively impacted by the Flower Avenue Green Street, I will have a reduction in the size of my lot, and I have lost 2 trees in the process of the gas work. I do believe it is a public good that benefits not only Ward 5 residents, but all of Tacoma Park. So we are looking forward to the bond approval and to the other piece to getting the Flower Avenue work done is actually the Carroll Avenue Bridge work being completed. And I will say in closing that as part of the Carroll Avenue Bridge project, there were traffic calming and safety measures that were put in place as a temporary measure, and I would argue that we should look at making those permanent. And then what I'm talking about in particular are the always stops at Flower and Maplewood and Maple Avenues. Again, thank you very much.
Great. Deborah Nelson.
Because you've heard from me a few times. I will live at 7411 Maple, and I've been president on the board of the Friends for the past year. I joined the Friends a year ago to give back for everything the library has meant to my family and my kids. The Friends raises money for library programs through used book sales and donations and memberships. And I'd love to talk to you about ways we can do even more in the New Hampshire area, raise money to expand programs and availability of books in that area. So let's talk about that. At any rate, you've heard from many of us about the value of the library to us personally and to the community, the broader community, as evidenced by the current overcrowding of after school and at library programs. The library's, a great place where we can gather from all corners of our city and share ideas, no matter what age we are, no matter where we're from, across ages, incomes, cultures. As I said at the last hearing, it really is our community living room, and I thank you for your willingness to invest in that. This community living room needs major repairs. The roof leaks, the HVAC is on its last legs, and ADA compliance is a must. So this is a unique, one-time only, cost-efficient opportunity to expand and update the space. At the same time, we are undertaking necessary repairs with a design that allows more people, more uses, and technological change well into the future. This bond issue will allow this to be done without a big yearly burden on taxpayers, and it falls well within the city's guidelines for indebtedness. It's a wise investment. So I encourage you to vote yes, and thank you for everything you've done so far.
Great, thank you. Next, Irene Houghton.
I'm Irene Huntoon, and I live at 7211 Maple Avenue in Tacoma Park, in Ward 1. And my family and I moved here in 2004, at which point I began to use the library regularly, both as a parent, as an adult who reads, and as a school teacher. I taught second grade for many years, and later worked for 8 years as a reading and language arts resource teacher. So I feel like I'm looking at this potential renovation with more than one set of eyes. I fully support the renovation for several reasons, and some of them are simply practical. The children's room is the only event space in the library, and it is now too small to host many of the events that take place there. When it is being used for an event, it cannot be used as a library. People don't get access to the books. And it's heavily used, even when it's not being used as an event space. We all know in the afternoons that there are many children there. And in particular, I would say that the children who we call teens and tweens need a separate space. And one of the other citizens testified about how noisy it is there. That's not going to go away, whether or not we renovate. So they need a space where they can come after school, do their homework, read, and not disrupt the other patrons who are using the library. And I'd say one of the things that's critical is that we are striving to be a walkable community, and I feel it's important to remind you that the library is within very close walking distance of 3 large public schools, all of whom send patrons to the library in the hours after dismissal. Many of those children, their only access to a large collection of books and to the internet is at the library. And once they hit the middle school range, they need access to the internet in order to do their homework. And most critically, a cell phone plan does not help because you get data that you have to pay for. And a lot of the research that you expect children who are ages 11 and up to do, you can't do it on a phone. And we have a large number of residents who need free and ready access to the internet in order to do their homework. And I would say, I know several people have said that, well, the new library in Silver Spring, is a substitute, and it's not, because it's 1.5 miles away. Children with heavy backpacks cannot walk there. And it limits the number of patrons who could possibly gain access. So I strongly encourage you to support the full allocation for the library renovation. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the folks who had signed up. Would anyone else like to speak regarding the bond issuance today? No, go ahead.
My name is Anand Parikh. I live in Ward 1. I've been a little f friend of the library since 2003, and a big F friend of the library since April, May, March. I agree with the other friends, big F friends of the library, on the reasons why we need to renovate the library. But I'd also like to direct comments to Mr. Dan Weber and thank the city staff, your predecessors, council members, and you yourselves for the efforts you've made to reach out to residents over the last several years to hone what the city needs and the design that the proposal that you've come up with. So thank you to the city and the council and your predecessors for getting us this far.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? Get the mic.
Hi, my name is Barbara Rosenblatt. I live in Ward 2. I also agree with the folks who think the library needs renovation. However, I do have some concerns about exactly how we're going to renovate it. My one concern is that I know we have the same architect as the one who did the Silver Spring Library, which I find completely unusable. So my fear is that this will be turned into a glass building with lots of glare and lots of empty, not user-friendly spaces like the one in Silver Spring, and I would urge us all to make sure that doesn't happen. I echo the concerns of those who need a quiet space and who want some separate rooms for different uses and different times of day, so that it's not a big, open, airy, beautiful, unusable space the way I perceive the Silver Spring Library to be. Thank you.
Right on.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on the bond issuance? No? Okay. Then we will end the public hearing. Going to our other items this evening are in our agenda. We have no changes for this evening's agenda. Looking to the future, on next Wednesday, June 14th, our meeting will be here. We will begin before the meeting at 6:30 for a reception to honor Sue Silver, who is the city attorney. She is retiring as the city attorney. So please come to the atrium at 6:30 next Wednesday. And during our council meeting, we will have a resolution recognizing her years of service as a city attorney. Next week, we also have the second reading ordinance authorizing the bond issuance that we just had the public hearing on. We have a first reading ordinance authorizing purchase of decorative streetlight fixtures, a single reading ordinance approving a contract with Capital FlexiPave, a single reading ordinance authorizing execution of a contract for services to perform the annual audit of the city's financial statements, a single reading ordinance approving a grant agreement with Tacoma Park Folk Festival, and a resolution providing for appointments to committees. Our work sessions next week include a presentation and discussion of the Community Grant Award recommendations and a discussion of the Emergency Tree Program Fund. This is a new tree program fund that the council put in this year's budget, and so next week we'll be meeting with the Director of Public Works to discuss how that will look in the future. On Monday, June 19th, so on a Monday, June 19th, we are going to have a special city council meeting regarding the discussion of the process and criteria for the hiring of a police chief. This meeting will be held at 7:30 in the Azalea Room. The focus of this meeting is to discuss the goals for the police department, the role of the community, and processes for selecting the new chief. And so that will be Monday, June 19th in the Azalea Room. On Wednesday, June 21st, our regular weekly city council meeting will be at the New Hampshire Rec Center. So not here. So Wednesday, June 21st, we are at the New Hampshire Rec Center. We are celebrating Immigrant Heritage Month that evening. We will begin the meeting at 7 o'clock with a reception. We have invited some organizations like Casa de Maryland, Ayuda, the Community Foundation that just began the Resilience Fund, and a few others to join us at 7 p.m. During that council meeting, when we begin the public meeting at 7:30, we start with a public hearing on the qualities and characteristics that the community would like to see in a new police chief. We will have the proclamation as June as Immigrant Heritage Month. Our voting session that evening includes a single reading ordinance approving the FY 2018 Community Grants Award. Our work session that night is an update from the Executive Director of the Tacoma-Langley Crossroads Development Authority. Tentatively scheduled, we'll have an update from the Executive Director of the Old Town Business Association, and we'll have a presentation of development partner proposals for the New Hampshire Avenue Rec Center. So I hope everyone can spread the word and join us on June 21st at the New Hampshire Rec Center. Then the following week, the City Council, we will be attending the Maryland Municipal League Summer Conference. That is a conference that many of us attend every year of city officials from around the state, and we do trainings, go to workshops, get ideas from other local legislative officials in Maryland. So we will be doing that. So no regular meeting that Wednesday, June 28th, but we will have the second of the two meetings we're having on the hiring of a new police chief on Thursday evening, June 29th. That will be, again, in the Azalea Room at 7:30. The night on June 29th, we will be focusing on the process and criteria for the police chief. So that's Thursday, June 29th. And that'll take us through June. So just as a recap, if people are interested in participating, sharing their views as the council discusses the search for the new police chief, we have on June 19th and 29th additional meetings. On June 21st, we'll have a public hearing, and there will be a survey that will go out to members of the public regarding that. And I missed something. The city clerk just texted me on June 21st. Oh, we have a second reading ordinance of the bond issuance that we're doing tonight. So that'll be the second reading. Right, June 21st. It'll be the second reading. Okay, great. All right, I think that's it for our upcoming meetings. So then now we'll have public comments on voting items. I'll do it just to make sure nobody came in late. The first voting item we have is the bond issuance, and we just had the public hearing on it, but does anybody else want to speak to that? No? All right. Then the next thing is we had tonight we have a second reading ordinance authorizing an FY 2017 budget amendment number 3. Were there any public comments on our second reading of the budget amendment? Okay. Then we'll move to just general public comments. If you'd like to come and speak to any topic, Mr. Lovelace will get you the microphone right away.
All right.
Go ahead, Mr. Lovelace.
Okay, this is Mr. Pat Lovelace, your official peace delegate. Okay, I want to tell you people out there that June is going to be a nice month for all of us, it looks like. But at the end of June, June 29th, 30th, and July 1st and 2nd, we're having a 4-day demonstration against the death penalty down at the Supreme Court. It's called Starving for Justice, a fast and vigil. You don't have to fast, but we'd like to have you people down there. It'd be nice if you could, but if you can't, come on down anyway. Just Maryland has already shown it can be done. We have abolished our death penalty. We no longer kill people for the state. So I'd like to ask everybody out there within hearing distance and in this meeting room to come down to the Starving for Justice. You know, it could be somebody you know someday on death row, and it could be you could find out that an innocent person's been executed, and that'd be tragic. It already has happened. And we also want to let you know that there'll be speakers from the different prisons who've been incarcerated and put on death row for something they did not do. and they're exonerated by DNA and other evidence. So I'd like you people to come down and get educated on the death penalty. Come on down. Bring your friends down to it. Something you'll never want to miss. It's July 29th to 30th, June 29th, June 30th, and July 1st and 2nd. And also the 4th of July parade is coming up, and I'm looking forward to being in your parade again this year. And I'd like to ask everybody to come on down and see the parade. Yep, it could be a lot of fun for you and your kids. And we better pray it doesn't rain. I don't think we have an indoor place set aside if we do, but it'd be nice. But I think we should start thinking about that the way the weather's been acting on and off lately. We should have an indoor place set aside just in case we get rained, and we can still have our music and stuff and our tables. So it'd be nice to at least have that if we get rained out. But the parade, I think we should try our best to be there. And I'm looking forward to being in it. Be there or be square. Thank you very much. Love it, love it, love it.
Thank you, Mr. Lovelace. Any other public comments this evening?
Hope so.
No? Oh, sure.
Well, I'm Karen Anderson again. Anyway, I've lived here for 50 years, and I have to tell you that I think with the selection of our new police chief coming up, I really object to people getting outsiders. These three gentlemen, headed by Captain Collington, would be ideal because they know us, they know the neighborhoods, and they know what's going on. So I'll come to the other meetings too, but I would hope that we would pick from our local.
Any other public comments? Okay. Mr. Jacobs, did you want to speak again?
I would
Just come to the microphone, sorry, so we get it on.
Yes.
Thank you.
Wait.
You're good. No, don't touch it.
It's red, so I think it says to stop. I'm still Troy Jacobs from Ward 5. I would like to remind Tacoma Park residents that we are in the midst of Ramadan through June 25th. And so some of our neighbors will be fasting through 8:30 at night, roughly. And so, this is a time of prayer and thought and of also celebration with Eid that will be later in the month. But just to be mindful of that, I think, and that's it.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right. Any other public comments this evening? Now we'll move on to council comments. Any council comments this evening? Councilmember Schultz.
A few things. I'll start off with the fact that the city is now circulating via email and perhaps other means a survey, and they're trying. I guess they're using SurveyMonkey as the instrument with regard to this consulting study that's underway as we speak on the, I think it's called the Strategic Survey on Economic Development and Housing for Tacoma Park. And part of that process is to ask questions of residents, get their opinions on things, to feed that kind of data, collect it and parse it and feed that data into the work of the consultant. And I've filled it out. It's a lot of interesting questions. And I would really ask and encourage strongly for as many people as possible to participate in the survey. It takes maybe about, 10 minutes or so to do. It's kind of fun. Wanted to mention that when we, about a year and a half ago, we amended the noise control ordinance that the city has to make it more enforceable, easier for residents to understand, and for our police department to enforce, made a number of changes in the enforcement powers of the police department. But we also constituted a noise control board, which creates a second method, indirect method, for residents to get their complaints heard about noise violations, noise disturbances, particularly those that are persistent. And what I wanted to say is that the Noise Control Board convened in April for the very first time since it's been formed to hear a case that was heard partially in April and was suspended because they needed, the panel needed to get additional information and evidence. So they met again a couple nights ago to conclude the first hearing. It happened to be a case of several residents in my ward to file a complaint against the Zion's Evangelical Lutheran Church on New Hampshire Avenue. The church and the homes are very, very close to each other, and the church gets used by a lot of outside groups for some fairly noisy activities. That hearing concluded. The Noise Control Board will be rendering its verdict in a fairly short period of time, a few days, a week, couple weeks, I'm not sure exactly. I have no idea, no one that I know of has any idea of what the decision of the Noise Control Board will be with reference to this complaint. But my point in bringing it to your attention isn't so much the particulars of the case, but for you to understand that this new Noise Control Board is up and it's running. I've sat through the entire hearing. I've actually testified under oath, and it performed remarkably well, particularly for its first excursion into this area. And it's available to any of us when we feel like, as residents, that our lives are being violated with noise that we just cannot tolerate. And we know that that's some of the most anxiety-producing things that can happen in our personal lives, when you can't sleep at night and you're trapped in your bedroom or your kid keeps waking up from his daytime nap and all that kind of drama. So this is sort of a note of, I'm just excited to announce that this thing is working as we hoped it would, and so I want everybody to know about it. And I think that I will leave that as my last comment.
Thank you. Councilmember Smith?
Thank you. I would like to direct my comments to Acting City Manager, Mr. Dan Weber. Could you have Ms. Braithwaite look into making some of the Carroll Avenue Bridge temporary traffic always stop signs permanent in Ward 5, primarily on Flower and Maplewood, that Mr. Jacobs had mentioned during his comments? Thank you.
Any other council comments this evening? Nope. All right, I'll just mention a couple of things. One is I would like to send a thank you to Mike Walsh, the city gardener. I was able to participate Saturday in the dedication, I think it was, of the Centennial Horticulture Club gardens on the corner of Piney Branch and 410. If you get a chance, people should walk over there. It looks beautiful, and I know the city gardener spent a lot of time with residents to make it that way. So if you're into gardening, I know they're looking for people to help weed, or if you just, there's a lovely bench there too if you'd like to spend some time over there. I'd also like to let folks know that this afternoon, myself and the head of Public Works, we were in Rockville, very long afternoon, a meeting with WSSC regarding the work they need to be doing on Little Eastern. They had a draft report on a number of things that they were looking into at the request of residents. They're going to answer some questions that we posed to them and then be sending out a notice to residents about that work proceeding on Little Eastern. So if anyone is interested, I can follow up with more details on that. And then finally, kicking off this Friday, Councilmember Schultz and I will be having lunch on Friday. I think it's every other Friday over the summer into early fall in the Crossroads area to bring attention to some of our wonderful businesses in the Langley Crossroads area. Many of them are actually been hurting over the last couple of months, and we have some wonderful restaurants. We will be at the Caribbean Palace on Friday at noon, if anyone would like to join us. This week, Delegate David Moon is going to be joining us. In future weeks, we will be at other establishments, and we have our state senator, Will Smith, is joining us, our other delegate, Janelle Wilkins, and a couple of other folks. So I think we have it up on the city website so people can look at the dates and the restaurants, but join us at Caribbean Palace at noon on Friday.
Yeah, you don't have to be from the Crossroads area or the surrounding community. Anybody in the city is certainly welcome, particularly small business owners, because that's one of the things we're focusing on in our economic study.
Okay.
What was the date of that again?
June 9th, Friday.
Thank you.
Oh, and this week is Staff Appreciation Week. So if you happen to see a member of our city staff, please send them a thank you. We have many members of our staff that work very hard for us all around the city, and every now and then, just stopping them, the folks who pick up our compost, pick up our trash, take care of our gardens, our crossing guards, our police officers, our rec department, just take a few moments this week, and it'd be nice to say thank you to all the work they do.
They're fantastic.
They are fantastic. And with that, I will turn it over to our acting city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a rather lengthy list of city manager comments for tonight, so I'll go through them as quickly as I can. First, follow-up from the last council meeting. Councilmember Mayle had requested increased police patrol and presence on Colby. We've increased the presence there, and we'll continue to monitor the area closely. Additionally, the police department is collaborating with Park Police to step up presence in some parks in the city and around the city where we've received some complaints lately about illegal or suspicious activity. Councilmember Kovar last week, 2 weeks ago, yes, we didn't meet last week, asked if, in addition to the online survey related to the Housing and Economic Development Strategic Plan that Councilmember Schultz referred to earlier, if there would be an opportunity for members of the public to provide feedback for the consultant's consideration outside of the survey. And I said I wasn't aware of anything other than the public meetings, but staff is actually in the process of finalizing arrangements now for a planned listening session that'll be scheduled for later in June. That session will be intended to provide community members with additional opportunity to provide input as the plan is developed. We'll also be doing a Facebook Live broadcast of it, so folks from home can tune in and provide comments that way. Additional details on that session will be forthcoming early next week. Thank you, Mr. Kovar. I had a plug for the survey as well. Mr. Schultz has already done that. I'll note that as of June 6th, a total of 226 surveys had been submitted. The city manager comments have a link, 2 links actually to that survey, and those will be posted this evening. The link is also provided on the city's website in a variety of places. Councilmember Siemens requested an update on the Carroll Avenue Bridge detour as it related to the upcoming Independence Day parade. I'm pleased to announce that we've been notified that the bridge should be opening on June 14th. So the opening should not impact the parade. On the same day, SHA is planning to remove the signals at Sligo Creek and Maple and at the Watt entrance. And I will inquire about keeping the currently temporary stop signs in place at Flower and Maplewood. I wanted to address the plantings on Tulip. The Councilmember Kovar has asked about a few times. They were delayed again because of the weather that we've had in the last week, and they're working on them this week. So hopefully the plants will be in soon. I know they've been doing work on the soil. They've got all the materials that they need. It's a matter of the weather cooperating and staff getting over there. Moving on to information to share, an update on the Washington McLaughlin and John Nevins Andrews properties. We met with representatives of John Nevins Andrews and learned that they confirmed that the school is going to be closing effective on June 30th, at which point administration, staff, and students will be transferring to their sister school. They're consolidating the schools. According to representatives of J&A, it's their plan to offer the property to any interested party for whatever purpose may be in the best interest of the city of Tacoma Park and the immediate neighborhood. In the interim, the facilities will be used in joint ventures of the Tacoma Park Seventh-day Adventist Church and the Sligo Seventh-day Adventist churches at various times, so the building won't be vacant while it's not being used as a school. Everyone using the property will be required to park on the property, and they're actively looking for people to either purchase the property or sign a long-term lease on it. Regarding the Washington McLaughlin property, the day after your last meeting, we learned that the real property taxes and charges owed by the property owner that were associated with the Montgomery County tax sale were paid off. It's not public information which entity or who paid the tax payments, so we don't know the answer to that question. That's been asked a few times. The good news is that since the tax sale has been satisfied, that the city will be receiving the taxes it's been owed for the last few years in the amount of about $28,000. I'm also pleased to announce that the request for proposals for county lobbyists hit the streets yesterday. There's a link in the city manager comments and on the city's website in the bids and contracts page. The RFP is for a qualified and experienced person or firm to represent and promote the city's interests to the county council, the county executive, and other county or MNC, PPC governmental agencies, boards, and commissions. So if you know folks who might be interested in submitting a proposal, please feel free to pass along the link. The Sligo Mill Overlook Playground work has gotten started. The contractor's on site this week setting up fencing and preparing for the work. It's expected to take several months to complete, but it's underway. We received an update recently on the Piney Branch Elementary School feasibility study. They're in the process of completing their report on the study, which includes cost estimates of the various options that were presented at the recent public meetings. They hope to have the report finalized later this month, at which time it will be shared with the superintendent and other members of the MCPS leadership team. That study, as well as others recently completed, will be used to help guide their decision-making process and the development of the upcoming CIP for fiscal years 2019 through 26. More to come when we get information on that report. This Saturday, this will be of interest to Ward 1 residents. It's more or less a heads up. Tacoma Park Boy Scout Troop 33 is going to be conducting an Eagle Scout project in Ward 1, where they'll be going door to door, passing out flyers on the Zika virus and mosquito prevention, and conducting yard checks to remediate mosquito breeding areas for residents who request it. That's being done in collaboration with our emergency preparedness manager, Ron Hardy, who, as you know, is very up to speed on all things Zika, consistent with his role with the COG. Our invasive management program, the mayor asked me to include a note about that. In April, some residents have brought concerns about the application of certain pesticides to treat invasive species to the attention of council and staff. And in response to the concerns expressed, all pesticide treatment was halted. As an update, we wanted to let you know that we are planning on working with the Committee on the Environment, now that we have the Urban Forest Manager on board, to review our current program and make adjustments as necessary. That will not likely happen until the fall, now that we're in full swing of things in the summer. And again, I want to make sure you know that we will not be applying pesticides to treat invasives until those conversations and the policy review occur. In response to the mayor recently joining other mayors from across the country pledging support of the goals of the Paris Agreement, we received some questions about what the city intends to do. We actually have a comprehensive plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions called the Sustainable Energy Action Plan, which was adopted in 2014, I believe. And we've been working on implementing its 17 key strategies through things like the Neighborhood Energy Challenge, municipal energy savings projects, expanding bike shares locations, the street light conversion project, to name a few. In the coming year, Tacoma Park is going to fulfill its commitment to the Compact of Mayors by completing a climate risk assessment and resiliency plan. So the good news sort of is, when I've been asked the question what the city plans to do, it's basically do what we've been doing, what we've been planning to do for a while. The city's Board of Elections has submitted its 2016 report of activities, and I believe that report is included in your blue folders, and it's also been posted on the city's website. Last night, the third of three planned community meetings co-hosted by Montgomery College and Tacoma Park was held. During the conversation, Montgomery College President Dr. Pollard reaffirmed her commitment to working with the city and the community to balance the needs of the community, neighbors, students, and fiscal prudence in the siting and development of the planned math and science building. She assured participants that a decision regarding the placement of the building had not been made. Initially proposed at the beginning of this process in March, the college and the city announced their plans to create a working group of representative. All right, that kind of, I have to take a pause. We're talking
with the college about creating a working group moving forward.
Exactly.
More to come.
Okay, more to come. An update on the home stretch down payment assistance program. Some good news. The Housing and Community Development Department is pleased to report that the city's been designated as a partner community in the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development's Community Partner Incentive Program. And under that initiative, with every $10,000 we're able to give to eligible residents for down payment for a first-time home, they're going to match that up to $7,500. So almost doubling the amount that eligible residents are able to receive. Ed Wilhelm Field is going to be closed from June 19th to August 30th, approximately those dates, as they do some ADA work on the softball fields. And finally, as far as information to share goes, we've heard a lot about the missing girls of D.C. and seeing recent reports of missing juveniles in the area. And in light of that information, I asked our police department about our statistics, especially since I'd seen a few critical notices go out recently. A total of 229 incident reports were taken since January 1st, 2014. It's worth noting, I think, that 98 of those were generated from a single residence in Tacoma Park, which is a group home. And I was happy to learn that there are no outstanding cases, that all missing persons and runaways are accounted for. I should note that might not actually be accurate. I drafted this about a week ago, and there may be one outstanding case right now.
Great. Councilmember Qureshi, are you going to?
And Councilmember Qureshi, who has been observing Ramadan, just got the go-ahead to eat. So he's going to do that. I have a kudos for the evening, and that's for Captain Richard Bowers, who graduated just this morning from the FBI Academy. Most of the people who most of the people who graduated from that academy, and they're people from all over the world, are probably not at a meeting right now. They're probably celebrating their graduation, so we appreciate him being here. It is a very selective, rigorous, and residential, meaning he's there for the whole 2 months of the program. Provides coursework and fieldwork and intelligence theory, management science, law, behavioral science, law enforcement communication, forensic science, and dealing with terrorism and the terrorist mindset. The purpose of the training, which, as I mentioned, hosts law enforcement officials from across the globe, is to raise law enforcement standards, knowledge, and cooperation, both within the U.S. and worldwide. And finally, the hiring update. We recently hired a new recreation manager, two new dispatchers in the police department, a recreation program front desk assistant, and we have on the third floor a new elections and special projects intern joining us in the clerk's office. We're going to be interviewing for the IT manager position next week and the following week, and have a few open positions right now, including a sanitation driver, equipment operator in the Public Works Department, and an HCD intern. And that is all I have for tonight.
I just want to make note particularly of the down payment assistance program and thank our housing staff because that has been in the works for almost a year now to get that cooperation. So thank you for finally getting that together. All right. Any questions for the city manager, the acting city manager? Nope. All right. We will move on then to our first voting item is the first reading ordinance authorizing bond issuance under Maryland Local Government Infrastructure Program to finance library and community center renovations and roadway and streetscape improvements. Does the acting city manager have anything or our finance director to say to us on this before I asked for it to be moved?
Yeah, I think you covered it well at the intro to the public hearing. You all have taken the very first step in authorizing the funds for these projects by adopting the budget, and now the next steps pursuant to Maryland law are to have the public hearing and pass an ordinance authorizing issuance of the bonds.
Great. Thank you. Any clarifying questions before I ask someone to move this ordinance? Oh, all right. Who would like to move it? Councilmember Kovar. Do I have a second?
Second.
Councilmember Smith, second it. You'll get next one. Any questions or discussion? No? All right. I would just like to thank the public for coming out this evening in support, talking about the library. I share many of the same sentiments, and I'm very, very excited about this moving forward, as well as being very excited about the Flower Avenue project and our Ethan Allen Gateway. This is the first reading. Do we need a roll call? No. We can just, Councilmember Kovar.
I'm sorry.
Oh, well, now all your lights are on.
I pressed my button when you started talking.
Yeah, he was first.
Should I go first?
Yeah.
Okay. But are you finished?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
I just do want to follow up on what the mayor said and thank the people who did come out tonight to speak in favor of the library. I really appreciate the fact that they were willing to do that. I know that people have lots of other things going on, so it's really great to hear all the testimony as to why the library is a valuable resource to us now and how it can be going forward in the future. And I would just say, in terms of the comments that were made about the Silver Spring Library, and I understand that, I think the designs look very, very different from that. And I don't think it's going to be in any way something that's going to have some of the negative characteristics that some people have attributed to that. And I think you can check the design out online and you can see that. So I hope people will feel positive about that. And that's all I have to say.
Councilmember Schultz.
I think this is a very sort of awesome moment for the city. We're getting ready to initiate the creation of a whole lot of debt, as we know, more than we have for quite some time. But I want to sort of say thank you to Councilmember Kovar and Councilmember Qureshi. So when they came on the city council a year and a half ago, they asked for us to sort of pause and do a reset and a reconsideration of our plans up to that point in time, and so we did. And we asked the architect to kind of do the same thing, and so he did. And we came back with a whole different concept that is different in several ways, but the most important one is not only are we sort of almost getting a whole new library in the broadest sense of the meaning, but we're making significant modifications to the community center by virtue of kind of uniting the library facility into the community center such that it's not such a separated space, and the space in between where the community center leaves off, that little octagon area in the library, plus some outdoor space that is sort of a no man's land on both sides of the building, will be incorporated into this. And so when we talk about it being a library renovation, it's really a good bit more than that. And that's why the cost of the project has gone up. And I think what it'll mean is a whole lot more efficiency, not just for the library, but for residents and others who use the community center as a whole. Thanks to my two colleagues here for helping us take that second look at the project. And I think this is going to be, when it's done, it's going to be a magnificent facility for our city. And I do think, I want to say that none of us up here is unmindful of the costs that we will be incurring over the next 15, in the case, years for the transportation bond, or the 30 years for the library bond. But we know that we can afford it. It will fit within our annual budget, and I think because it's spread out over 30 years, while the cumulative interest will be obviously high, the annual debt payments will be reasonable, and I think we can easily manage it without compromising the fiscal integrity of our city. So, just wanted to say those two things and how proud I am to be able to be part of this analysis and approval process.
Councilmember Qureshi?
Thanks, Mayor. I'm still trying to have my meal in the back, and I had to come back here for this purpose because this single project, particularly as it pertains to the library, to me is my pride and joy of something I was involved in with this council and have been involved with this council. And there's discussion tonight, it's the month of Ramadan, and Ramadan is a lot about introspection and giving and charity. And there's this concept in Islam called sadaqah jariyah, a continuing charity, a charity that benefits people in your community even beyond your death and your life. And I think this library represents that. I think an expanded library that addresses various segments of our community, including teens. You have police officers here today will tell you that teens who have nothing better to do after school than to just run the streets are the most at-risk people in our community, and we have tons of them here. And what makes this library so unique is that it's a stone's throw away from two major educational institutions in our community. So I consider this to be a form of charity that will benefit our community beyond this council, beyond most of our lifetime here. And I think that's what is important about this. And there's been discussion about, well, there's an election coming up. And if it means that I lose the next election, it's worth it, because this type of debt is smart debt that's for the benefit of our community. And I'm so glad to be a part of it. I'm so glad that Councilmember Kovar and I didn't upset our colleagues too much when we came in here and wanted to revamp everything. And I appreciate very much the community input as well. And I assure you that we take this debt seriously, and that we also are not going to create another Silver Spring spaceship type of library in our community. We're going to create one that's going to be reflective of our values. Thanks.
Councilmember Smith?
Thank you. My focus is going to be on the Flower Avenue Green Street at the library. When I first was elected, this was a concept, an idea of turning Flower Avenue into this wonderful boulevard. But the problem was there wasn't the money. The money was not available. There was only around $600,000 from the state, around a $200,000 and change from the county to build a sidewalk on the Silver Spring side of the street, but that was it. And there was a resolution in place that prevented the city from putting actual city dollars from the general fund into the project. But the residents of Ward 5 demanded more. They wondered why the city was not willing to actually invest their money into this project. And there was another project that was being proposed, the Ethan Allen Gateway project, and it did not have the similar financial constraints. So I worked with my colleagues at that time. There were different council members, and I got the resolution that prevented the council from putting money into a future budget overturned. And so that made money from the federal government available for this project. A transportation alternative program grant became available, and the city of Tacoma Park was the only municipality in the state to win that grant at that time. But it required matching funds. And so I am delighted that my colleagues have agreed to invest over $1 million of city general funding into this project through a bond. This is probably the most money that the city has ever invested in Ward 5. Ward 5 is one of the poorest wards in the city, so I'm just delighted that this has happened. Thank you.
Great. Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to take a moment and thank my colleagues on this council for adding a couple of nickels and dimes for what I think is top priority in this spending that we're talking about. And that is beginning to do the work that's necessary to eventually modify the first level of this building so it ends up into a much more suitable office for our police department. The first step of that is to enclose the pit between this floor and the basement. Put the floor in so we have a little bit more meeting space up here, or community space up here, but my primary goal in advocating for this change is so that we can have more space available in the bottom floor of this building, and eventually include the money that's necessary to realign the offices down there so that there's more adequate and respectable space for our police. Thank you.
Great. All right. So this is a first reading, so we don't need a roll call on the first reading. No. All right. So all those in favor of the ordinance.
You said yes, you do?
No, on first reading we don't. You want to say? You
No,
want
I
to
was
okay.
just trying to join in. Everybody's telling you.
I know, everyone's telling me tonight. All right, all those in favor of authorizing bond, the ordinance authorizing bond issuance under Maryland Local Government Infrastructure Program to finance library and community center renovations and roadway and streetscape improvements, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we're done with it. Next, we have the second reading ordinance authorizing FY 2017 budget amendment number 3. There was a change from the first reading of the budget amendment. We got, I think, the final invoice on the dog park, and it was a bit more.
There were actually two changes.
Okay.
One was a correction of the transposed numbers that Eagle Eye Councilmember Smith pointed out for the first reading, so we made that correction. And the second is that originally, the first reading, the total expenditures for the dog park were $210,000, and just yesterday we received the final invoices, and they amounted to $227,500. So slightly higher than the $210,000. That correction is accounted for in this budget amendment. Other than that, everything is the same as the last reading.
Anyone have any questions before I ask for this to be moved? Who would like to move the budget amendment? Councilmember Qureshi, who's Councilmember Schultz second. Any other questions or comments on it? This is a second reading ordinance, so will the clerk call the roll?
And just to confirm, this is as amended, please.
Yes, as amended.
Councilmember Tovar? Aye. Councilmember Real? Councilmember Qureshi? Aye. Councilmember Seaman?
Aye.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Schultz?
Aye.
Mayor Stewart?
Yes. All right, that does our voting session tonight. Next, we have our work session. This evening, we have a discussion about police department operations and practices. There were a number of things that came up when we were discussing the budget and right after our police chief resigned in early spring. So as we were going through the budget, we collected these questions, and I first want to say thank you to the acting city manager and to our police department for collecting the information and providing what we have tonight. Just to give us to give some context to how we should go through the next little bit and look through this material. There's a lot of material here that we'll go through this evening. As we are looking for a new police chief, we thought it would be helpful if, as we're going through these different sections, we think about, are there some questions that we may want to ask a potential candidate for the police chief about these things? And I will keep a running list of those. In addition, what are some things that we may want to come back to, larger policy discussions that we'll want to have once we have a new police chief on board? So the goal tonight is not to take any votes on any of these issues, but really to begin this conversation and to ask more questions and to educate ourselves on some of these operations and practices of our department. So
Okay,
I'll turn it over to the
thank you.
acting city manager.
Thank you. And I should also note that all three police captains are with us tonight, and they can provide clarification where necessary and can respond to additional questions that aren't covered here. As the mayor mentioned, during the budget deliberations, some questions came up about police department expenditures, operations, and practices, and staff provided information to council at that time and said that we would certainly come back to provide information on some other questions that were asked that weren't necessarily directly related to the budget deliberations. So the purpose of the item tonight isn't to provide sweeping overview of all the department's policies, procedures, expenses, or things like that, but it addresses some specific questions that we heard from council members during the process. In particular, questions were asked about spending on police department weapons, vehicles, and in particular SUVs, police department technology, and then there were questions about the policies and procedures pertaining to the complaint process, and then the operations of our emergency response team. So I think, may I propose that we go through each of those 5 things one at a time, and we can speak to each of those items as necessary, and then at the end we can maybe turn elsewhere that you'd like to go. Does that sound reasonable?
Sounds perfect.
Okay. So regarding weapons, the information that was requested was police department spending related to weapons and ammunition and justification for trading in existing pistols for new ones, which occurred last year. So the department last year spent in total about $16,500 on ammunition for all weapons, and that includes pistols, rifles, and shotguns, and about a total of $2,600 to trade in the .40 caliber pistols that were being used as service weapons for new 9mm pistols. There were a total of 50 pistols that were switched out, and all officers received the new pistols. The decision to switch was based in part on the age of the existing pistols and the desire to move to a new gun that had less recoil and for which ammunition was less expensive and more readily available. The .40 caliber weapons ranged in age, but they're generally between 5 and 10 years old. Police service weapons are often replaced within that range, depending on how frequently they're used. Primarily for training is where they're used, departments vary pretty widely in their replacement cycles, but generally that sort of 10-year time frame is what departments shoot for, no pun intended. Both the .40 caliber and 9mm pistols are very common service weapons for police departments, and according to police staff that I spoke with, there was a noticeable improvement in accuracy for a few of the officers when they switched to the 9mm weapons. The fiscal year 18 proposed budget includes about $14,900 for ammunition. Police officers are required to train and practice on weapons proficiency throughout the year, typically at a shooting range, and that is where a vast majority of ammunition is used on an annual basis. There is no funding proposed in fiscal year 18's budget for any new weapons. So any questions about the weapons or the switching out of the pistols?
Councilmember Siemens?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess one of the things that struck me as questionable was that I thought the department had 9mm pistols several years ago when Chief Ricucci left the department. And then we went to the 40 caliber.
40 millimeter.
And,
sorry.
And then moved back to the 9mm. And I was just wondering what was going on there.
Maybe one of the police captains can speak to that. I didn't go back as far as the previous transition.
So back in the 90s, Councilmember Siemens, we had Beretta 92F 9mm pistols. At that time, I believe Anderson was chief. We traded those pistols to Beretta, and they gave us the .40 caliber pistols at that time. That was the original transition, and that occurred somewhere in the 90s. We transitioned out of those pistols under Chief Kramer, so that would have been somewhere around 2000, 2003. We transitioned from those pistols to the SIG 229 pistol, which was in .40 caliber as well, and we carried those guns until we recently transitioned to the SIG 320 pistol, which is back to 9mm. The part of the reasoning is, the FBI conducted a study on terms of weapons and calibers and things like that, and you can debate which is better and which is worse, but essentially what they determined was that being able to hit something is more important than anything else. And they did a big study through their agency, and they have 13,000 agents, and they train and they shoot about 30 million rounds a year at their training facility in Quantico, and they determined that the best round to issue an agent was a 9mm caliber pistol, and that's what they switched all their agents from .40 caliber pistols to 9mm pistols over the last 2 years. And so using their research is what we based our transition on.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions on the weapons section? No? All right, then why don't we move on to the vehicles?
Okay, for vehicles, as I mentioned, the questions that we received were primarily related to SUVs. The specific question was, why does our police department seem to be purchasing more SUVs, and who makes decisions about which vehicles are purchased and when they're replaced? The transition toward a greater proportion of SUVs in police fleets is actually something that's happening nationwide. It began, according to my research and conversations with staff, when the traditional Crown Victorias were retired by Ford in 2011. Those were much bigger sedans than what we're seeing today, what are offered to police departments today. Our fleet currently is 46% SUVs, and that is ahead of the curve for in comparison to neighboring municipalities. We contacted a number of neighboring agencies, and without exception, we learned that departments were making the transition to more SUVs. And in fact, in at least 3 municipalities we contacted, they said that they were going to be replacing all sedans with SUVs as they reach the end of their replacement cycles. There are a number of reasons why police departments are moving away from some of the sedans to SUVs. It has largely to do with the types of vehicles that are being offered. Today, police officers carry and wear significantly more equipment than they used to. In addition to pistols and handcuffs, patrol officers carry or wear bulletproof vests, at least one portable radio, usually more than that, chemical sprays, tasers, a knife or other multi-purpose tool. As you know, our officers are wearing body cameras now that protrude from their bulletproof vests or otherwise their uniforms. And they carry multiple flashlights. SUVs provide more room for equipment than sedans do, and they also have more carrying capacity for passengers and other non-wearable equipment that our officers are driving around with. Another reason is the height of SUVs makes it easier for officers to spot unsafe behavior in neighboring vehicles, texting while driving, seatbelt violations, etc. And they can scan the periphery where they're in the area in which they're driving more easily. Additionally, and this was one that I saw a lot in the research and heard from officers when I spoke with them. The height makes it physically easier for officers to get out of their vehicles, which can happen dozens and dozens of times throughout a shift. I heard personal anecdotes of chronic back issues that were linked to the number of times officers were getting in and out of low vehicles wearing all of the gear that they're wearing. SUVs cost only slightly. I was surprised to learn that SUVs cost only slightly more than sedans, but when you look at the economics, their resale value is greater to the extent that they may be cheaper in the long run because we're getting, agencies are getting a lot more back for the SUVs when they're sold at auction or to the public when they reach the end of their replacement cycle with the departments that they're in. SUVs are obviously better for inclement weather. They perform better in crash safety tests. And another place that I was really surprised was in the fuel efficiency ratings for SUVs. They're actually comparable to other types of vehicles that are issued to police departments. The EPA certified mileage per gallon for the Ford Interceptor sedan is 18 mpg city and 23 mpg highway. The SUV, which we use, is 16 mpg per city and 21 mpg for the highway. Neither of those are super great, especially given how efficient some vehicles are getting these days. But there are, police departments, police officers have certain needs, and the Ford Interceptors, both the sedan and the SUVs, are by far the most commonly utilized in police departments. Beginning this year, decisions about vehicle replacement are made.
Can I ask a question?
Please do.
Yeah, I know that police, these interceptor vehicles, whether they're sedans or SUVs, are structurally different than the average car that anybody else is going to buy in terms of their frame, their transmission, their suspension, the kind of tires that they use to enable them a great more deal of greater versatility in dealing with the kind of job. And I was wondering if we could learn a little bit about whether that's the case with the SUV from our captain here on that subject. I mean, I'm just curious to find that out. Is what I just described something that's...
Yes, Councilman Schultz. So the utility vehicle is Ford's version of it's a certified police vehicle, and it's what they call a pursuit-rated vehicle, which means the Michigan State Police takes it and actually drives it on a track and certifies it to be used at high speed. Some SUVs are not what they consider to be pursuit-rated. They're service vehicle-rated, which means they don't want you using them in an emergency capacity, like running high speed and chasing people. So this utility the reason that it is because it's actually built on a car frame. So calling it an SUV is sort of a misnomer. It is a sedan frame, and drivetrain and the tires and the wheels and the brakes and all of that are identical to what you would find on the sedan. All Ford does differently is put a different body on top of it, and they give you essentially the same car. So you have an identical vehicle, and they come with oversized brakes, a larger transmission, a bigger alternator, bigger radiator. The one main structural difference that Ford does with these vehicles is they are built to withstand a crash at 75 miles an hour from the rear, which a regular passenger vehicle is not. Several years ago, we had one of our detectives who was driving home late at night. He stopped on the side of 495 for a disabled auto. He was operating one of our unmarked police vehicles. He was struck in the rear by a box truck, and the vehicle was totaled and completely destroyed. The officer was injured and went to the hospital, but had that not been a police-style vehicle that could withstand that kind of crash, who knows how bad his injuries would be. He's still with us today, and that was about 8 years ago or so that this crash happened. So he was fortunate that he was in the right kind of vehicle. And while our officers generally don't stop on roadways which would see speeds like that, when we have take-home vehicles, our officers are traveling up and down the interstates and out in the county, and they do stop to help stranded motorists along the highways and stuff. So when they're out there, we try to make sure that they have the kind of vehicle that's necessary to protect them and the other citizens that are out on the road with them.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, that helps.
Do you have more to say on vehicles?
I was going to talk about how decisions about replacement are made, but if there's questions about the vehicles that we have right now, we can.
I have a question, but it may go to a deeper issue, and this is for either one of our triumvirate of chiefs that are sitting here, which I kind of like. I got to say, you guys are doing a hell of a job, and the city appreciates it, the council does, and I hear from residents how well you guys are doing, so we appreciate you. This idea of preventive policing, as you have heard in council meetings previously where public has come up, there's some concerns that people have. Putting aside the SUV issue, which to me makes sense, is the idea of our vehicles being intimidating, our uniforms being intimidating. And I think it was Charles Ramsey who did it, but this concept of preventive policing in D.C. where the cars are patrolling around with blue lights on because it's a more proactive approach to policing. I know that we are you guys are running the department, so I would defer to you, but I just want your general thoughts on whether those types of issues have been considered in the past, redesigning what our vehicle looks like and what that process is and how you make determinations of what our vehicles look like and how you patrol and whether you consider things like stationary lights or whatever they're called for preventing policing that we see happen across the border in D.C.
So if you'll notice, some of our cars have two different graphics patterns on them. The current version that we use is the much brighter version. I guess it was sometime about a year ago at the mayor's request that we look at the markings on our vehicle because they were kind of dark and not easy to see and potentially provided something that wasn't approachable. At the mayor's request, the chief of police at that time went into kind of an examination of what they looked like and looked for some graphics that would lighten the side of the car up while not having to replace an entire fleet of gray cars. We could do something with the graphics package that would then present them in a different light, which we've done, which the brighter blue and the white lettering that we have on the bulk of our cars now. We're still in the process of transitioning all of the vehicles to that graphics pattern. It's something that we're working on slowly as we have an opportunity and funds to do. But as we move forward in the future, all of the vehicles coming in will get that different graphics pattern on them, which we think is a more approachable look. It's a much brighter color, and therefore it's a little more attractive to the eyes instead of the darker blue on the gray. And in terms of the marker lights that they use in D.C., I think that's kind of an agency preference. I know that it was done in the district because they were having some crime waves, and I don't remember if it was Chief Ramsey or the last chief that was just there. And it's just something that the department has to decide on in terms of a policy sort of thing. It cuts both ways. It can work against you in terms of traffic enforcement, but at the same time, it can work in your favor some other places. But for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So if you're announcing your presence and somebody potentially wants to commit a crime on the street and they can clearly see where you are, they just wait for you to drive past, and then they can still commit the same crime. If they don't see you, does that have an effect? I don't know. But there's always a give and take. Does it help with the perception of public safety? Absolutely. And so if you have marked police cars that are more visibly lit, are the citizens going to feel that there's an increased perception that the streets are safer? Most likely, yes. And if that's something that, as an organization, that we would look at, and that's some direction you want us to explore, we can absolutely do that.
one last follow-up to that. It's not related to vehicles, but since we're talking about colors.
Right.
You are the 3 highest-ranking police officers in the department, the most recent chief who left. At what point do you wear white shirts? Is there ever come a point where you reach a rank within the police department where we know that you are somebody other than a patrol officer? I'm just curious.
So that's one of those probably internal topics that's been sort of debated back and forth in some organizations where their command staff wears a white shirt. Some organizations, they do not. Montgomery County, everybody wears the same color uniform. Prince George's County command staff wears a white shirt, and I think maybe in D.C. they wear a white shirt. And there's probably split opinion here as to what color shirts we should wear. Some of us like to wear the same color as everyone else so that we don't distinguish ourselves and that we all are the same police officer. And the rank is pinned to our uniforms. Some would have us wear a different uniform, and that's kind of one of those personal internal debates that, I mean, if that's something that the council wanted us to examine in terms of uniforms, we could. But maybe the next chief, has a preference for white shirts versus black shirts. But
All right, I just was curious. Thank you. I'm not asking you to do anything.
Right, Councilman Barrett, actually, while you're still there, since you talked about the decals on the cars, another topic that you and I have discussed are the tinting of the windows. If you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and we've discussed that internally, and one of the things that we are going to be looking at is all of our fleet vehicles in terms of making sure that they are matched Maryland State Code for any vehicle tint that's on them. And that the front windows are clear of tint so that people can see through them. With the exception of certain vehicles, obviously, our canine cars, we do tint the windows that much darker. Obviously, we have the dog in there. With the heat and the air conditioning, we really try to keep the temperature down. That's what the bulk of the window tinting is for. It's not to hide the officer or anything like that. It's really for the safety and protection of the animal. We don't want to expose them to any sort of heat that we don't have to. Because during the summer on a 100-degree day, those cars can get hot, even with the air conditioning cranking in them. On some of our CID vehicles, they do keep the windows tinted on those. They transport victims from time to time in them, and we keep those windows tinted for the safety of those victims. They may have to take them to a crime scene, do a show-up, things like that. And so that's why those windows are tinted, so that if there's a victim of a crime in there, the suspects may not see them, or they're going to court, and they can have some anonymity.
Thank you.
Can I follow up?
Yes, sir.
Because I have had some feelings about the tinting of windows, particularly on just the patrol cars that cruise through our neighborhoods. A lot of time, because we've talked about, figuratively speaking, transparency, but here we're also talking literal transparency so that residents can see that it's Officer Holmes that's going down Wildwood Drive or something like that. And I think that it's a much more welcoming opportunity for recognition of that it's just not a mysterious vehicle with an unknown driver, but somebody that we might recognize.
Right.
And that's something I advocate.
Yes, sir. That's something that we're working on.
Okay, thank you.
Do we want to continue the report and then we'll come back to? Okay.
I have a couple of other car-related.
Oh, okay.
Are we done with cars?
No, we're not done.
No, we're still on cars, but I was going to have the acting city manager just wrap up the points on cars and then come back to the Q&A. Is that okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Actually, Councilmember Kovar, if your questions are car-specific and not about how they're replaced, I think now is a fine time to ask those questions, because I was going to talk about how decisions are made to replace them.
Cars, okay.
I'm happy to do it either way.
Okay.
So 2 questions, and maybe I didn't see them specifically covered here. One, I did ask about it, the budget, and some information came in. I neglected to follow up on it, but it relates to the vehicles that are damaged and what happens with the insurance and what happens with the drivers who are involved in accidents. So if somebody could talk about that.
So it depends with the insurance, if a vehicle is involved in a crash, if our officer's at fault or if it's the other vehicle's at fault. If it's a striking vehicle, if our officer is not at fault in that, then the at-fault insurance company will pay for the repairs on our vehicle. If we're at fault in the crash, obviously our insurance company will handle the repairs. In terms of what happens to the officer, that's Captain Collington's and Captain Firstcorn's realm of expertise. Generally what happens, though, is depending upon how many crashes they've had, and if they're at-fault crashes, they're subject to progressive discipline. So the first time you have a crash, you might get a letter of reprimand. Hey, you had an at-fault crash. It was preventable. Don't do that again. And you get a letter. The second time, you're subject to maybe a loss of leave. And the third time, a suspension.
And do you see that as, I mean, is that a common thing, or would it be fairly rare that somebody would be involved in more than one?
I will tell you that we drive cars all day. Their officers are in the cars for 12 hours a day, driving about the city. Crashes happen. They're the cost of doing business, unfortunately. We do everything we can. When we identify somebody who has a driving issue, we send them for retraining. We work on trying to take corrective action with them. And every now and again, somebody, just like anyone else, they have a bad string where they may have 2 or 3 crashes within a year. Some may be their fault, some may not be. But we look at those, and Captain Collington works with those folks to make sure that if there needs to be some retraining, it's done. If there's disciplinary action that needs to happen, that's done as well. Generally, we haven't had any get to a point where it's become a critical employment issue.
And on the take-home vehicles, is that sort of a recruitment kind of question or a convenience factor? How would you describe that?
The take-home cars is a multitude of issues. It is a recruitment and a retention at the same time. I was hired here in 1995, and we did not have take-home cars, as Councilmember Siemens knows. I believe we owned about 8 cars at that time that were shared among the 42 officers. In the patrol shift, you would come in, you would take the keys from somebody else, and you handed the keys, and the cars got run into the ground, and they weren't well maintained. The union negotiated take-home cars, and I don't remember which year, probably about 2006, 2007 now. And part of that was we were losing people because every other organization around us offered that as a benefit. Greenbelt City, Laurel City, Hyattsville City, Montgomery County, Prince George's County, every other police department within our vicinity offered a take-home car as a benefit. And so we weren't able to compete with those other organizations at a simple benefit level. And it's a benefit to bring people in. They know, hey, part of my employment here is this car. And it helps for retention because we prior to that, we would lose people to other organizations that offered those benefits.
And do you think that, I mean, obviously there's wear and tear if someone has to drive a long distance. So how do you factor in, this is my last question, how do you factor in the impact of the take-home vehicles on when the replacement has to take place? Because extra mileage and wear and tear, et cetera.
It is extra mileage, but, and I hate to use the term highway miles versus city miles, because there's really not a lot of highway miles around here, even if you have to drive up 95 because it's still stop and go. But the officers, we do keep the cars longer, and they're better maintained. One person has that car for 4 or 5 years, or maybe the entire life of that car. They sort of take a little ownership and pride in it. They take it. Some of them keep the cars in their garage. Some of them wash and wax them on a regular basis. So they take a little bit more pride in the vehicle. If it's got a little funny sound to it, it goes straight to PW, and they get it fixed right away. Whereas before, when we didn't have extra cars, you drove a car until it didn't run anymore, and then it went to PW. So because you just didn't have anything else to drive. And so I think the cars are better cared for now. I mean, the condition of our fleet I think is fantastic. We have nice equipment. Our officers take care of it, and that's something that they pride themselves on, and we pride ourselves as an organization is we offer our employees good equipment, good benefits, and we think that they stay for it.
Okay, thank you. And I do want to just follow up on what Councilmember Qureshi said. All 3 of you have been quite responsive on various individual questions and issues that I've reached out to you on, and I appreciate that very much. So thanks.
Okay. Councilmember Siemens?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. I just had a question about the tent. You had mentioned that you're transitioning to that. Are we now?
No, sir. Some vehicles had it installed at one point, and we're actually in the process of working on which vehicles need to have it taken off.
Okay. And so the new vehicles you're getting?
So any of the new vehicles we order, particularly the utilities, they come from the factory with the rear windows, the long windows in the back at a particular factory tint. And that's just the way they come from the factory. But the front windows, the front passenger side glass, they don't have any tint on them. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're working on getting back to.
Okay, great. I wanted to thank you, Mr. Damweber, for the report on this. Some of my other questions I think are more appropriate for future when new police chief is here, such as, are there opportunities? I know that all of the officers are not on patrol duty, and so there may be other types of vehicles that might be more appropriate for them. But again, we can talk about that. And also, like, you can talk about the uniforms too, but that's certainly not going to be the new police chief's first priority. So.
Councilmember Schultz, did you have more to say? Or
No, I did not.
Okay. And Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. Captain Bowers, a question for you. Regarding the undercover vehicles,
Yes,
do they go through the same procurement process?
All of our, yes, sir. Yeah, all of our vehicles go through the same procurement process. And one of the things, I mean, whenever we purchase any vehicle, because that expenditure exceeds $10,000, it's even though it's in our budget to purchase, we still come before council with the resolution and everything to actually make the purchase of the vehicle.
And do they require any type of special packages placed on them?
So those are generally civilian vehicles, but we have restrictions in our policies about how they can be used.
Okay. And are those vehicles kept here, or are they just kept?
We try to keep them in places where they won't be recognized as police vehicles.
Okay. All right. And on average, what is the cost and the number that we have?
The number of vehicles,
Yes.
or so of the special vehicles for our investigative unit, anywhere between 4 and 5 of them at any given time.
Okay. And the average cost?
Off the top of my head, they run about $30,000 a piece. Our regular utility that we purchase as a marked vehicle hovers right around $27,000 to $28,000, depending upon the model year. And so these vehicles, because they're civilian package, we don't quite get the same discount on them. They run right around 30.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, Mr. Dan Weber, it's back to you.
Okay. So what I was saying about vehicle replacement, beginning this year, decisions about vehicle replacement citywide are made by the city's fleet review committee, and decisions are made based on our vehicle replacement addition and transfer policy. This committee was put in place, and the policy that's been adopted simply clarify and formalize previous practices. We were doing these things, and now the process has been formalized and the policy and procedure codified. In general, when vehicles in the city fleet are replaced, they're replaced with vehicles of a similar make and model. We strive for all replacements to be more energy efficient than the vehicles that they're replacing. In addition to energy efficiency, cost and operational needs are considered when determining which replacement vehicles to purchase. And attached in this packet is a copy of the vehicle replacement addition and transfer policy, as well as a charter on the fleet review committee. I would note that there's a table in the policy with the title Fleet Replacement Eligibility Criteria. It includes age in years, mileage, average annual maintenance costs, all which are considered when the Fleet Review Committee is determining which vehicles are at the end of their life cycle and need to be replaced. Police vehicles have a slightly lower number of years that it's looked at, and it's simply because of the sheer amount that they're used. Typical department admin vehicle lasts about 10 years before we sell it, and a police car lasts about 8. And mileage-wise, the police cars rack them up significantly higher than our department admin vehicles. So I'll move on to technology unless there are
Anybody have any questions about the vehicle replacement policy? No, thank you. It was really very well thought out, and it was good to know that policy is in place and that the committee's there, and thank you for putting it in place.
Yep, absolutely. We have a similar thing that's been put in place for technology purchases as well. The question that was asked from a council member or council members is what technology has been recently purchased by the police department and who makes decisions about those purchases. We define major technology purchases as things that are $1,500 or more. In this fiscal year, we purchased for the police department few different softwares. Starlight, which is a software that gathers real-time computer dispatch data from area police and fire departments and makes it available to officers, command staffs, crime analysts, other personnel. Beast barcode inventory and property evidence software. It's a way that we mark and inventory evidence and other property. Power DMS, which is an electronic document management software that's used in the police department, and we're considering broadening it to other departments, actually. That's the software that CALEA requires be used in submitting documentation for accreditation. LexisNexis Accurant is a software used for managing and sharing investigative notes and information both amongst internally amongst our officers and with external agencies. And then the Analyst Notebook, which is an IBM product used for data analysis. We have increased some of our data analysis software because of the needs of our crime analyst, who does tremendous things with the data that we're able to gather, both from within our own department and data that we are able to gather externally. And that is largely what many of these softwares are used for. We also purchased body-worn cameras. There's about a $35,000 annual fee for those. As you all know, we replace annually field radio equipment, and this year we spent $18,000 on field radio equipment. Kind of to put that into context, I mentioned earlier that all of our officers carry these portable radios. One of those radios costs about $6,000, so that's why there's a tremendous cost associated with that. They're not.
Can I ask you a question just while we're on that? Do we do any of the cooperative purchasing through COG for that?
Do we do any of that for the radios?
Yes, all of our radios are purchased on a contract with Montgomery County.
Cool.
Thank you. That was a number that I found very, very surprising, because I'm thinking of the Fisher-Price walkie-talkies that I had when I was a kid versus the equipment that our officers are using. And they're very sophisticated portable radios. We spend money annually on annual replacement of the mobile computers. All of our vehicles are outfitted with mobile computers for our officers' use. And then another major purchase this fiscal year, which is in the process of being made, is a new interview room camera system. We are required to have a certain level of equipment, store data for a certain period of time. Otherwise, certain cases can be thrown out in court, and this was a real need in the police department. For fiscal year 18, we plan to purchase a new case management software and a new business automation software. That business automation software is for the data analyst, and it will the crime analyst. I'm sorry. It'll allow him to establish parameters for data extraction across a variety of crime data platforms and other softwares. Essentially, it is a tool for him to develop macros to pull information from a variety of sources and bring it all to one place. It will allow him to program intervals when that actually occurs and save him many hours a day on doing that manually. We're going to be, spending money, our annual fee on body-worn cameras, radio equipment, and mobile computers. Regarding who makes the decisions on purchases, the police department does not make technology purchases decisions unilaterally. All purchases greater than $1,500 have to be reviewed and approved by the city's technology steering committee, which reviews proposals annually and occasionally on an as-needed basis. Again, attached to this agenda item is information on the technology investment process and the charter for that committee. For example, the Automate software, the reason that I know so much about what that does is because it sounded to me, as the chair of the Technology Steering Committee, like something that we already had. It seemed like some of these softwares are doing the same thing. And I went down and had the capabilities of the software demonstrated to me because our crime analyst was using it on a trial, 30-day trial basis. And I was immediately sold when he showed me what it was able to do. So we do, the Technology Steering Committee has a very rigorous review process. It turns down things that we don't think are really justifiable expenditures, and we ask a lot of questions about the justification for purchases of technology. Again, just like the city fleet, that is something that occurs citywide, and it's not just germane to the police department. So any questions about technology?
No. Let's move on to
All
the
right.
complaint system.
The next I guess topic is the complaint process. The question asked was, what is the current process for lodging a complaint against an officer? How can the process be improved to make it easier to submit complaints? And I'll note that we posted this last week, and even since then we've made some changes that I'll talk about. But in general, the policy of the police department is to create and maintain a system that assures objectivity, fairness, and justice by prompt, impartial investigation and review of all complaints, allegations of police department misconduct. Investigations are conducted in accordance with the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights. Complaints received go to a professional standards manager who conducts a preliminary investigation to gather details and provides a synopsis for the chief. A determination is made by the chief regarding the level of the alleged violation. There are two different categories, Category 1 and Category 2. Category 1 complaints include allegations of corruption, brutality, improper use of force, or criminal misconduct. They're sort of the very serious types of complaints. Category 2 complaints include allegations of rudeness, delayed response, and other complaints that don't rise to the level of Category 1. Category 1 complaints are normally assigned as internal affairs investigations, and Category 2 complaints are normally assigned for administrative review that the officer's direct supervisor handles. All complaints are investigated, tracked through the department's internal affairs software, and there is a general order associated with complaints that provides which disciplinary action needs to be employed for various types of complaints depending on the outcomes of the investigations or the findings. In general, some things that could be done to make the process of submitting a complaint more easy for a resident is one that actually we implemented today, and we've starting today created an online form to submit both complaints and compliments. And the content of the form is the online form is the same as one that somebody would previously have to come in person to the police department to fill out. We've heard criticism of the previous process that requiring somebody to come in person to the police department can be intimidating. We all understand why that can be the case, and that's one of the reasons why we set up this new online form that people can use. Something that's not part of the formal policy, but that is highlighted on the complaint website, on the city's police department website. People are always welcome to submit complaints or allegations directly to me or the city manager if they wish, and we will certainly look into the issues. I think that's always important to note. Another change that has very recently taken place, even since this item was posted, is that all copies of complaints, whether they're submitted online or in person, will not only go to the professional standards manager within the police department, but a copy will go to the city manager's office. In that way, in the interest of transparency and additional oversight, somebody outside of the police department is receiving copies. And another change that we plan to make effective immediately is that I'll be notified, somebody in the city manager's office, I should say, whether it's me or the city manager, will be notified in the event that somebody comes in wishing to file a complaint and for whatever reason decides not to, just so we're aware that there's somebody who's coming to do that. Just from experience and things that I've learned from talking with the police captains, something that we get a lot of, well, not a lot, but more frequently than other complaints, more frequent than other complaints that we receive are related to parking tickets. A lot of times people come in because they want to show us a picture of where their car was, et cetera, and they're given information about the policies or procedures that they can follow, and it does not result in a formal complaint. Even that sort of information, I'll be making sure I'm made aware of. Like I said, in the interest of transparency and additional oversight, and because in the city manager's office, we're interested in learning how often that sort of thing happens.
For the record, that wasn't me who filed those parking ticket complaints. Just
all right. And in addition to some of the things that I mentioned, we fully appreciate and understand the council's interest in looking in greater depth into our complaint process. The improvements that I just mentioned, I think, are a big step, but they really are the first step, and we are looking forward to your further discussion about how we can make complaint processes through policies and procedures more transparent and easily understood to ensure that they're being handled properly.
Can I ask a question about
Yeah,
that?
Councilmember Gresham.
And this may be for the captains. As a prosecutor, I deal a lot with complaints against officers, and we talked about progressive discipline and these things that seem like preventable accidents, but I've been in serious violent crime trials where defense counsel are cross-examining an officer about how many times he backed his patrol car into another, because it shows that progressively over time, he or she might have a motive to curry favor with the government by testimony in a certain way, such that he won't be disciplined by his superiors, which is a huge pain in my behind. But the question that I have is from a different perspective. This complaint process, in D.C., we have the Office of Police Complaints that functions. In New York, we have, I think it's called CCRB or something of that nature. At what point do these citizens' complaints become elevated within the police department where it has an impact on an officer's progressive discipline, and who handles that sort of investigation within the department? And the second piggyback question to that is, as a small police department, how robust is your IAD section, and how many people is that, and what kind of manpower do you have there?
Well, so we have the IA Pro software, and all of our complaints go into that, regardless of whether it's assigned as an administrative review or an internal affairs investigation. So what happens is when the complaint comes in, and I'm the professional standards manager right now. It's typically the commander of the criminal investigation division. So I look at it and do a synopsis of it and give it to the chief, and then the chief decides which way it's going to go on whether it's going to be internal affairs or whether it's going to be an administrative review. Regardless of how it's assigned, it goes into IA Pro, so it gets tracked. And another thing with IA Pro, it keeps all the information in there. You can put everything in there. You can put videos in there. You can put interviews with the officers or with the complainant. All that information goes in there, but more importantly, it also tracks discipline. So there's other agencies that have gone to it because they've had issues with fairness and discipline. And this way you can go in there and you can look at it, and it'll tell you what happened with this, what was the finding, when the finding happened, what the discipline was. And we currently in our general orders have a disciplinary matrix. So normally pretty much everything falls into the matrix. So when you're looking at it, it depends on the history of the officer too. Do they have a lot of complaints? Is this their first complaint? Is it their first traffic accident, or is it their fourth traffic accident within, a certain period of time? Within IA Pro, there's also something called the PEWS system. It's the Personnel Early Warning System. So even if an officer has a couple accidents or was involved in a couple pursuits or had some sustained findings, it will alert. We have a parameter that's set up for if a certain amount of items, regardless of what they are, it could be a combination of different items, occur within a certain amount of time in a 6-month period, it'll send an alert. So it could send us alert, for instance, that an officer was involved in 5 pursuits in a 6-month period. That's something we want to look at because we want to make sure that the pursuit policy is being followed, and it could be that every one of them was fine, or that every complaint, that maybe they got 5 complaints in 6 months, but all 5 complaints were unfounded for whatever reason. We're still going to look at that because, and what's going to happen is the supervisor gets notified, and then the supervisor will have a sit down with them and go over why they were activated. And it could just be, you got activated because these things, I don't see that there's any problem here, or I do, and you should work on this. So it's just another way to help out with that. As far as personnel, it comes to the Criminal Investigation Division whenever there's a complaint, and it's either handled by me or it's handled by the sergeant in the Criminal Investigation Division. If it's an administrative review, then it goes out to any of the patrol sergeants or supervisors that are responsible for that officer.
And do you make or take efforts to ensure that whoever is overseeing that complaint process is not obviously like a direct report of that individual, or may have had a role in the incident that was involved? You know what I mean?
Yeah, if it's someone that's involved in it, they're not going to be the person who oversees it. It'll go to someone else.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Schultz?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that this new complaint process, to the extent that we've made it available online, speaks very directly to our racial equity objectives, because what it means is that if somebody doesn't have a way to drive or get themselves to the police department, or they're an undocumented immigrant and they're just nervous as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs about coming down to the police department, they can they can use this form to make their concerns known. And I think that's something really, really important that we need to make sure people know about it.
Councilmember Kovar?
Yeah, I just wondered, there was state legislation passed last year that made some changes to the complaint process, but also the amount of time that there would be for officers or the department to respond and so on. And I recall that we had already updated the website to reflect that. But does that in any way affect or change this process in terms of how it functions day to day, the state legislation?
No, it doesn't change it. I went into our IA Pro software and changed. They had some reporting requirements that needed to be changed as far as the personnel early warning system. We had, I believe it was 5 incidents in 6 months. They had 3 incidents of a certain nature within, I think it was in a year period, had to go in there, which didn't quite fit with what we had. So I went in there and changed it so that we do get that alert if it happens. And then some of the other stuff you're talking about happened with LEOBR. They changed some time frames and some different things within LEOBR, but it was minor, very minor changes. We have we get very few complaints. Last year we had, I believe, over 22,000 contacts. We had 18 complaints. So that's pretty low. This year so far we've only had 6 complaints, and it's June, so it's an average of 1 a month. And sometimes when community members come across the police, it's not under the best circumstances. Maybe they got to get a ticket or they get arrested, and sometimes people aren't happy and they file complaints. And I find that the majority of our complaints are low-level complaints like courtesy, stuff like that.
When you count the complaints, I would imagine that also includes, say, emails that one of us gets and then forwards on to you, or no?
If sometimes, yes.
Sometimes, yes.
Yeah, it depends what the level of involvement is that we have to be involved in. If it's something that we're looking into, then yeah, it gets entered into IA Pro.
Okay. Councilmember Siemens?
I just wanted to take a minute and thank Mr. Dan Weber for making these changes and thinking about how else we can change the process to be more transparent and provide better oversight.
I appreciate that, and I would pass those right along to all three captains who have been very, very receptive to the conversations that you all have been having, and
sure they have
and
good
very
ideas
responsive to the questions that you all have had and that I've had. So.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Captain, if the software package alerts you and you have a meeting with the officer that has had whatever the issue is, when are these conversations just verbal or are they all papered?
Well, what happens is, before what happened was I would send an email to whatever supervisor it was, and I would tell them that the Pew system was activated and this is what I wanted them to cover. We just recently purchased Blue Team, which is a separate portion of IA Pro. That goes on to the supervisors' MDTs, their mobile data computers. So this stuff can, instead of going through an email, it goes through the system and tracks right and goes right back and feeds directly into IA Pro. So to answer your question, it is in paper because the supervisors will respond. Before they responded via email, now they're going to respond via the system, and it's all in writing on what they covered. So it's, I met with this officer on this date and time, and these are the policies we covered, and this is what we went over. So it is documented. It's not just something that's verbal that we can't then go back and find out what happened.
Right, okay, thank you.
Great. Now I just want to extend my thanks to the captains and our acting city manager. Some of these changes are changes that unfortunately we have been asking for a while, so I'm glad to see them implemented. And I would just ask, following up on what Councilmember Schultz said, to be aware of in our general orders and other things that we put out as a department, when we don't need to use the word citizen, that we don't. Especially during this time when we really mean residents or individuals, and there's not a citizenship requirement, that we're conscious to that. I know sometimes we default to the word citizen when we really just mean a person, an individual, or a resident. So I think we can pay more attention to that these days. All right. On to the ERT, the last item.
Okay, so the emergency response team, why does the city have an ERT, and what are the budget implications of having an ERT? So an emergency response team is a unit of officers who, in addition to their regular duties, prepare for and respond to emergency or other unusual incidents. Our ERT was established in 2008, and their purpose is to conduct various special police operations, especially those that have relatively high risk, to provide support for the Operations and Support Services Division, respond to critical incidents, and assist other agencies upon request. Our ERT is made up of 7 members of the department who work in patrol and investigations, and they convene as a group for required training or when an ERT operation is required. Our group is called an ERT, the Emergency Response Team. They are called, other agencies call them ERTs or SERTs, Special Emergency Response Teams. CERTs is the name that the previous organization I worked for used, Community Emergency Response Team. And they're in many ways a derivative of what used to be called in many agencies a SWAT team. There are several reasons why the Tacoma Park Police Department has an operational ERT, and the number one reason is public safety. The ERT adds full-service agency capabilities to our department. We're the only full-service municipal police department in Montgomery County, and while an ERT is not required to be considered a full-service agency, having one adds to our department's capabilities. We have 2 colleges, several public and private schools, and we bordered the nation's capital. And because of our proximity to the capital, there is it's reasonable to assume that there's a likelihood that a critical incident could happen around here. We've actually seen a few, such as the recent Capital One bank robbery, in which our ERT was deployed. Having an ERT within the department allows the city to have immediate access and availability of members in the event that there is a critical incident or an emergency that we need officers to respond to who have a special skill set. Another reason is for enhanced officer and community safety. As I mentioned, public safety is the number one reason why we have an ERT. The use of ERTs or whatever other agencies might call them across the nation has shown to substantially reduce the risk of injury or loss of life to citizens, police officers, and suspects when critical or emergency incidences occur. The advantage of the Tacoma Park Police Department having our own ERT is that we have officers that are specifically trained across the department that are readily available for critical incidents. An officer with specialized tactical skills and training greatly benefits the department when we respond to things on a daily basis that might not be considered critical or emergency. Another advantage is the enhanced fitness training and leadership component. ERT school and other training incorporates fitness, leadership, and discipline. Our ERT our officers in the ERT have annual physical fitness standards that they have to meet. So that's good for health, efficiency, and good health reduces personnel shortages, and it also enhances our employees' quality of life. When they're not actively involved in operation, team members are the equivalent of a decentralized team among the various squads and sections within the department, as I've mentioned before. And while they're working in their respective units, there's a perception that the level of fitness, discipline, and training of the team members has a positive effect on the morale of other officers that they work with. It is a major appeal for potential recruits and for retention of our existing officers. And many conversations that I've had with our officers about the ERT, I've been told that as it pertains to recruitment, new recruits typically offer or ask three things. What's the starting pay? Do you get a take-home vehicle? / what kind, if you do? And what types of special units do you have? It's something that many people who are interested in getting into the law enforcement profession see as an attractive thing for a department to have. And it's not just the ERT. There are other special units like the Special Assignment Team, K-9 Bike Patrol. That's one that I hope to see us increasing our use of in the future. And I hope to see increased use of it. I think it's an excellent community policing. I think it's an excellent community policing strategy, and it allows our officers to get in places very quickly that they might not be able to get to as quickly on foot or where you can't go in a vehicle. And career development is another advantage related to the things I've mentioned earlier. Many employees place training in high regard and view training as a major component of career development. ERT members are subjected to a variety of specialty training in a more disciplined environment, and they're required to attend more trainings than a typical officer who's not in the ERT. Additional costs specific to the ERT include direct and indirect training costs, weapons and equipment costs. Related to training, ERT members are required to engage in training 2 times per month on topics such as weapons proficiency, tactics, negotiations, and event resolution. Non-ERT officers are generally attend weapons proficiency training 3 times a year, in addition to other in-service training. Training usually occurs as part of the regular workday, whether an officer is part of the ERT or not. Overtime and comp time is earned if training occurs on a day where an officer would normally be off. which again is the same for any officer who is attending a training. Because ERT members train more with weapons proficiency than other officers, they use more ammunition, and that amounts to approximately $5,000 a year. They go to the range, and so they use more frequently, so they use more ammunition. Regarding weapons and equipment specifically for the ERT uses 50 caliber pistols instead of the 9mm pistols. They both are similar in price. The 45 caliber pistols have more recoil than the 9mm pistols, require a better level of marksmanship. The rifles used by the ERT are different than those used by patrol officers, as they are better suited for use in confined spaces. The rifles are about $400 more each than the rifles that our non-ERT officers use. Just to provide context, that's a difference between $800 and $1,200. The ERT have specialized helmets and body armor that cost about $1,900 each, though we're reimbursed half of that cost through a federal reimbursement program. And they also have a tactical observation camera, which was purchased 2 years ago. This is a camera that allows them to clearly see around things, over things, things of that nature. It's used in the course of their operations. And finally, the other direct cost associated specifically with the ERT is the ERT van. In 2010, the city manager had approved the purchase of a van for use by the ERT. However, based on competing needs, the decision was made to purchase a new van for Public Works and transfer the existing Public Works van to the ERT for their use. When that van reached the end of its useful life, it had been in the vehicle replacement program. A new van was purchased using the equipment replacement reserve funds that is used by the ERT. So any questions about the justification for having them or the costs?
Councilmember Siemens?
Thank you, Mayor, and I thank you for all this wealth of information tonight. One thing caught my ear as you were talking, and that was the special fitness training and requirements. Mm-hmm. We've been told through many years of my years on the council that we could not require fitness training of our police officers. We've specifically asked about that because of injuries that officers have incurred, mm-hmm. and been told that we could not legally ask for or set fitness requirements for our officers. And I just wonder how this is different than that.
Well, maybe one of the captains can respond to that. I do know that in order to, there are specific standards that if you have an ERT or a CERT or SERT, national standards, I believe, that must be met, and one of them is related to
two topics.
Fitness.
One is fitness standards in general, and then the other would be related directly to the team. So fitness standards in general, we do have a fitness standard at our entry level. So to apply to the police department, one of the first steps is to take a fitness test. It is a standard law enforcement fitness test developed by somebody called the Coopers Institute down in Texas. And they did a massive study of public safety personnel, including firefighters and police officers. And they found what were norms for physical fitness. And then they set percentiles. So we require people to take a fitness test. And those fitness tests are standardized based on age and gender. So males and females, depending upon your age bracket, have to perform a certain number of push-ups, sit-ups, and each one of those is meant to test a core body function as well as endurance for a run.
That's at time of recruitment?
That is at the time of recruitment, yes, sir. We do not require a mandatory test beyond that point. We do a involuntary or a voluntary testing every other year or so when we have time during in-service, just to give folks an idea of where they stand in their personal physical fitness. There's several of the officers, myself, Officer Sims, Sergeant Holtzel, who have attended the Coopers training.
You and Officer Sims, you're saying about the same...
We are very similar physical fitness-wise. He's a little smaller than I am, but... He's back there, yeah. So anyway, so
I'm
we...
sorry.
I'm off track. Anyhow, so we do require some levels of physical fitness. One of the things going forward, obviously, as a condition of employment, that would be something that would have to be negotiated into a union contract. I know that there's been some interest over the years to have some incentive-driven physical fitness standards and testing in place for staff. Obviously, that's not my world to live in. That's something that's negotiated between the union and the city. So that's something that they talk about. We do try and encourage everybody as much as we can to go to the gym. We all go. The guys go. So we try to set the best example we can about physical fitness. And so as it relates to the team, one of the requirements to serve on the team is the physical fitness standard. And it's a pretty rigorous standard. Basic entry into any SWAT school, one of the pre-requirements for that is to pass a physical fitness test. Most of them consist of 40 push-ups in a minute, 40 sit-ups, and a mile run in less than 8 minutes, and a certain number of pull-ups. And that's a bare minimum just to enter the school. And if that's all you can do, you're going to really struggle to get through a 3-week school. It's extraordinarily physically demanding. Everybody who's on the team went through one. I went through one in 2011 when I was much younger and in much better shape. This is extraordinarily physically demanding. And if you can't minimally do that, you will not be able to pass the school. And the idea is that when you're on an operation or any type of event that could run a long time, you have to have the physical stamina to go up a flight of steps.
Yeah, I
and do
understand
something.
that. I wasn't questioning the
Right.
need for that with the ERT. It was more a question of, can we just put everybody on the ERT so they have to pass the physical requirements?
Well, we would take them all, and we would get them there. But unfortunately, not everybody would be prepared for that.
Okay. I thank you. And then training-wise, and Mr. Damweber, I have questions about, we put a lot of money, as you said, into training for the ERT, but at the same time, I think the council has, through the years, asked for other training, soft skills for officers, that I haven't seen the same enthusiasm for that. And I just make that as a comment at this point. I think the council needs to give some thought and consideration of maybe setting some additional training requirements that we need. That's all for right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilmember Schultz?
Yeah, I'm just, Captain Bowers, curious about a couple things. How often does the ER team function? Is it, as a team, on average over a period of whatever time you would think is on a monthly basis or an annual basis?
So in addition to the 2 days of training a month that they already do as a group, it depends on the number of operations that are scheduled. Not all of them are easily predictable, but they try to do a number of different things. They were involved last week in an operation over on Lockney Avenue, which was a very large number of people, and they were brought in as extra personnel to help assist with that large crowd that was there.
And I'm aware of that.
Yep. It really depends on what's needed at the time. We may have a month where operationally they don't do anything. We may have a month where operationally they do 3 or 4 different things. They were recently over on Houston Court doing an operation. So it just depends on what's going on. And we try to do as many different things as we can. It's always about public safety and about reducing risk, not only to the citizens of the city, but to other officers. And so we try to look at where they're going to be effective. If it's doing some sort of overwatch detail, last year, or it may have been a little bit longer ago, during the Black Lives Matter demonstrations that we had up in Old Town. Shortly before that, there had been some assaults on police officers in Houston. And so as part of that, the officers from that unit did something we call Overwatch, which is to stay even further back and just sort of keep an eye on the crowd in the perimeter so that nobody can come up and cause problems for that group that's unseen. And so there's a lot of things that they do that aren't necessarily recognized. They're not high profile, but these are the kind of things that they do.
Yeah, one of the reasons I know that I'm aware of 2 occasions in Ward 6 that this team has done its job. You mentioned the one last Thursday evening up on Lockney, and I know that it took about 2 to 3 months of preparation in order for that particular search warrant to be obtainable. so that they could go into the property that they needed to go into. And the place was full of people, and I think over 30 civil citations were issued for drug possession, among other things. And so, and then I think probably back in February or March, over in the Hillwood Manor Apartments, they were used to literally knock down the door in an apartment where drugs were being cooked or prepared, and to arrest people. And I understand in that situation, that might be a situation where they would go in and not know what they're going to find on the other side of the door facing them.
Yes, sir.
And it was a situation that was brought to the attention of the owner and the property management. It was a deep concern by the nearby residents who knew that there was something. They could smell the odors and were very frightened about what was going on, and were very, of course, relieved. And I think in both cases, this team had the assistance of ERT people from the city of Laurel, or maybe some other agencies. But so I'm aware of that, and I know that all of us are probably greatly unaware of many of the things that they do that don't need to be made public.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let's see, who's next? Councilmember Qureshi.
Thanks.
Okay.
I guess my question is with the ERT, I mean, it's kind of sad that every single day I feel like I read something in the paper of an active shooter situation or a barricaded individual in a building. In Tacoma Park, God forbid, if that's something that happened, is that the team you would dispatch or your leadership would dispatch?
Yes, sir, it is. So one of the things that's unique about our team is that they're what we would consider be decentralized, which means that they're all assigned to other functions as their primary job. So every shift has some members on it. Some shifts have 2, some have 3. So in the event of an active shooter, at like the Navy Yard or Sandy Hook or any type of events, they're going to be the first officers that respond anyway. And they're going to have all of their tactical gear with them in their car because they carry it with them. And they'd be able to enter that building with a higher skill set and different weapons that would enable them to hopefully neutralize whatever was going on there much quicker. As a follow-up to that, yes, we would bring in the rest of the team and any allied agencies that we would use to finish that operation. Clearing a building, depending upon the size of the structure, it could take hours, bomb techs, and some other things, depending upon the natures of the threat.
And I don't particularly, support this hypothetical position that I'm about to present to you. I don't, but I want to just get your thoughts. I mean, as a municipality that's neighboring the district, and then you also have PG County, Montgomery County, which have their own ERT teams, or whatever they call them. In the event that there is a situation that warrants activation or deployment of that type of a team in Tacoma Park, and we didn't have our own ERT team, I want to talk about 2 scenarios, one being an emergency situation and another being not so much an emergency, but for the benefit of an existing case or execution of a very serious either search warrant or arrest warrant. In the emergency situation, I'd just like to get your thoughts on how you would arrange that with a neighboring jurisdiction if you need that assistance. In a non-emergency situation, how do you make that request, and how are you prioritized based on your needs?
So if for some reason we didn't have a team, is that the
Yeah, that's the hypothetical.
If we didn't have an existing team in an emergency situation, we would utilize either Montgomery County or Maryland State Police, and we would make a call to their emergency communication center and make that request to their day work sergeant, who would then forward that request to the SOD commander, and they would make a determination if they were coming. At that point, they would then dispatch their units, and they can take up to an hour or 2 to get here, depending upon where they're coming from in the time of day. If we needed an armored personnel carrier from the county, they generally don't have somebody ready to drive it. It's stationed up in Gaithersburg. It could take an hour or 2 to get here, and that's critical time that we're losing, obviously. And their officers live, obviously, just as spread out as ours do, but they could take some hours to get here. So in the event of emergency, you're probably looking at 2 hours before they're actually on scene, capable of doing anything. With our folks, most of them live much closer. We've had one instance where we called folks in the middle of the night, and everybody was here in less than an hour and ready to go to work, which is what we ask of our staff to be able to do. And that's sort of in an emergency situation. Obviously, the county patrol officers would show, but they're going to be the same skill set as our patrol staff. In a non-emergency case, we would make a request through the county SOD commander, and in the same form that our detectives right now, if they have a warrant that needs to be served, we have something called a matrix that they complete, and this matrix determines the level of response that warrant gets. If it's a document type warrant, our team commander, which is me, or the team leader, which is Officer Godlutsky, would review that and determine that this is a document warrant, and there's no additional threats, and therefore the team's not going to serve that warrant. And it would be given back to the detectives to serve themselves, because that's something that doesn't meet the threshold for us. It's in our policy clearly when we can use the team and when we cannot. So we would not do that. If they fill out that matrix and it meets the criteria, it would go to the county SOD commander, and they would then schedule it when they have time to come down and do it. So the Montgomery County SOD is very busy. And any given day, they may have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 warrants to serve in the morning. And you're on their schedule, which means they tell you, we'll be here at 4 a.m. to do your warrant. They're going to be here at 4 a.m. to do it, and they're going to do it, and they're not going to wait for anything else. Or with using our team, obviously we have control over it. As an example, we had an operation over off of Orchard Avenue. It was a grow operation. The officers knew that there were young children living in the home. They knew that they went to school at a particular time. Our officers waited until they saw all of those kids leave the premise before even making an approach to the house. We knew the situation, and they were able to do that warrant. They actually stopped the person out in front of the residence and executed the search warrant, and that person actually thanked them. At the end of the day, he was very grateful that the officers waited for his kids to go to school and that there wasn't a big scene at his house. If you use the county SWAT team, they're not going to wait. They're going to come 4 a.m., they're going to do their thing, they're going to make entry, and they're going to leave. We have our own control of our own team. They follow our policies, our guidelines. They're accountable to us. They're accountable to you. If we use the county, we lose that accountability. For our team, and I don't off the top of my head know how many operations we've conducted, we've had one person get injured in the entire time, and it was more of an accident than it was on purpose. He hit a shield, one of the ballistic shields that the point officer carries, and it has a window in the front of it which has some sharp edges, and that's how the person was injured. He hit the shield, got his head cut. We were able to get treatment for him and took care of it. So we're accountable for ourselves. We're accountable to you. We're accountable to the citizens of the city. If we don't have our own team, we lose that accountability here, and we turn it over to the county or the state, and then we don't have control over what we do.
Thanks, that's really helpful. I appreciate that.
Councilmember Kovar?
Yeah, thank you. Just one question.
Yes, sir.
If I understand correctly, so when there's not an incident that specifically requires the ERT to work as a team for a higher level type of incident, then some of those members of the team are basically could be deployed in the city doing standard patrol
Their
work?
regular job is as a patrol officer or detective. This is a secondary responsibility. Like Officer Sims is a patrol officer tonight. If at 2 a.m. there was an incident that required him to be a ERT officer, he would transition into that role. If he wasn't, he would just stay in patrol.
So it sounds like, though, as compared with the other patrol officers, they have added skills or training or fitness or whatever. So in just a more routine type of occurrence on patrol, I mean, are they better able to address the situations than other patrol?
And here's why. So a lot of things what they do involve searching for people, searching homes particularly. We get open doors at houses on a pretty regular basis, alarms off, open doors, burglars at homes. These officers have special training and enhanced training on how to search a home. And they generally will lead their shift and take care of that. They've also enhanced a lot of the other officer skills because they pass that information on. And so to do those things, though, it takes time and training to get good at those skills. And then they're able to transition those skills to other people. So, yes, them being part of that shift brings extra skill sets, extra capability to those patrol shifts.
And so the other patrol people might actually defer to them on an incident, even if it wasn't at the level where you would actually formally activate the team.
Yes, sir.
Right? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councilmember Smith. You haven't spoken to this yet, have you? No. All right.
Thank you, Captain Bowers. And first, I'd like to thank the commander of the team. He has been very helpful in some of the situations we have had in Ward 5. And I hope vigilance continues because I think the ERT team is vital for certain things, and illicit activity, for whatever reason, seems to be attracted to this city. Can you tell me, you have a core group of people, so why is it that that number has not expanded, or how did you come to, you have, and you don't need to tell me the number, right? But let's say it's 5 members of the team, right? So why do you need 5 rather than 7?
The number of people on the team has to do with an operational need in terms of how tactics are designed and integrated. And if you have 2 people, obviously you don't have enough. Is 10 too many? So one of the things that we do, you try to find a balance in the number of personnel that you can have on the team. And so one of the issues that we faced is finding enough people. And because you have people who take vacation and other things, and that was one of the things that we began working with other members of the COG area, which is currently Laurel City. We've also had conversations with Greenbelt City, and they also are in very similar positions in having teams, having a tough time with funding, equipment, and other things. And so by being able to combine resources, we're able to get more for our dollars. So that way, if we have, let's just say we have 5 people and Laurel City has 5 people, now we have 10. And so we're only footing the bill for half of it, and they're paying for the other half. And so we're all benefiting from that relationship. And it's something that's mutually, and with the more municipalities that add, Hyattsville City has a team, Greenbelt City has a team. You know, as we work closer with other municipalities who are in similar positions as us, we can form a bigger partnership that reduces our cost, and we still gain the same resource from it. But the number of people that you need per operation sometimes is dictated by the structure that you're going to go into or what that operation is. And like we had in Councilman Schultz's ward with 40 people, we knew we were going to need extra bodies. If we have a tiny little efficiency, we may know that we need less people.
It's late. Just 2 quick questions.
Yes,
one, you mentioned all these other municipalities that have teams. Do we have mutual aid agreements with them so that our teams can work together?
So we do through COG mutual aid agreements with Greenbelt and with the City of Laurel. We'd like to work on. We presented at one point a separate MOU that we'd like to get back to. At some point in the future, obviously, we may wait for a chief. It's up to the mayor and the city manager how we move forward with that. But we would like to establish them. I know Hyattsville City is not a member of COG, so we don't do much with them. But we'd like to be able to work with all of them, and that would take some different MOUs. But we'd like to get there.
And if you had a choice, would you expand the number of people, permanent number of people on the team?
I would add people if it didn't lessen the standards for what the team takes.
Okay.
If we are always, every year, we put out a casting call. Anybody who's interested in being a member of the team. The City of Laurel puts on what we call a prep school. It's a 1-week class to see if this was something that you're interested in. It gives you a taste of the training and what it's like to be on the team. Our officers participate with Laurel in the training. We help instruct the training. Officer Godlewski goes over with them. And so we this year had 2 officers participate in that. And from there, they'll decide if they want to be a permanent member of the team. And if they do that, then they'll apply for membership and be interviewed and have to pass a physical fitness test and then go through a regular 3-week school and serve a probationary period on the team. If we add people, obviously there's implications to adding people in terms of training costs and equipment. So we have a set number now that we're fairly happy with, but if we have new people that want to come on, we do see people transition off the team. As some of us get older, we are not able to participate as well, and we just had an older team member leave, and so we bring somebody new in to replace them. But we generally stay with a set number.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Since this is your second time around, I'm going to jump in. Okay.
That's fine. That's fine.
I have a couple of questions. So first, thank you again. And we keep forgetting to congratulate you on your graduation today. So thanks for being here tonight. So you mentioned there's a lot of other cities, a lot in Prince George's that also have some type of ERT. And, I think one of the reasons this is a topic that we'll probably come back to when we have a new chief is that there's a lot of questioning about the growth of ERTs in police departments and their needs. And I think one of the things that you mentioned in answering a question before is, having our own ERT, we have greater accountability. And you don't have to answer this question tonight, and I would give it to all three of the captains and maybe even some of the officers who are involved in the ERT. I would actually like to talk more about how we actually do have accountability, because up until having this information, I've been on this council for a number of years, I didn't feel like I had enough information to hold anyone accountable for the actions of the ERT. That may have been in the past, and as we've seen tonight, changes are being made very rapidly in the department that we're all very happy for. But I think there had been a lack of transparency and good communications. And again, you don't have to answer this tonight, but as we're talking about the ERT here and having one versus relying on other jurisdictions for that, I would like to think through the accountability piece. And the other thing is in terms of the training. So if folks who are on the ERT are doing twice a month training, that means they're not then doing their other patrols that they're here for. So that means other officers have to cover that. So there is a cost to us overall in terms of coverage to have these officers do this training. Should I think of it that way, or is there?
So there's always a cost with everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's a question of we would pay that person to be here today to work a patrol shift, or they're going to be in training. The patrol shift is still staffed by a minimum number of people, and generally speaking, it doesn't require anybody to backfill on that staff for any overtime. So if a person is out today in training, the patrol staff still functions as normal. So a maximum number could be 6 to 7 people, depending upon the shift that's working, or if there's a traffic section working as well. The minimum number of people would still always be satisfied. So that number of people would always be here. And the training and the team members are aware that sometimes they have to modify to make sure that we're not incurring excess cost, or leaving their own shifts in a bind, and they're cognizant of what goes into making sure that we can accomplish both missions.
All right, and the other thing, again, this goes into the category of just thinking about things and pondering them as we're doing all this. I think there's been, again, conversations, not just in the county, but across the country, on the increase in having to deal with more and more with mental health issues. And, what trainings go into that, and really, is it that we need something like the ERT, or is there the idea of having some special unit that works on mental health?
It's an interesting dilemma when you're dealing with folks that are having a mental health crisis. The worst thing that can happen is you call the police because your loved one is threatening suicide, and they don't survive the encounter. The officers don't go to an encounter like that with the intent to have to do that, but they can sometimes get forced into it. There's a phenomenon called suicide by cop. When we have an ability to employ different tactics other than the conventional tactics that a patrol officer would use, I think we increase the opportunity for us to safely resolve that situation. As an example, if I have a person who's armed with a handgun who's threatening suicide, they can take a handgun and go from here to here in an instant. And so if I'm in my patrol capacity and I'm dealing with that person and they want to initiate a conflict, they can easily do that conflict. If I'm an ERT officer and I have additional capacity, additional protection, shields, something that we don't have, which is an armored vehicle, we can change that scenario and that equation, because we can change the distance. We can change the threat that they can pose to us. And if we can reduce the threat they pose to us, we can prolong that encounter long enough to make some other choices with that person to get to the resolution we're trying to get to, which is life-saving. I mean, the whole purpose of the team is to save lives. It is to ensure public safety, not to go out here and injure folks or do something that is counter to what we believe in. And so all of the things that they do are intended to extend and extend that encounter long enough for us to be able to come to some other resolution. So I do think that when it comes to dealing with mental health, time is on our side, and we create time in those instances with good tactics, cover, and advanced equipment. And so I know that there's a thing about militarization of police, and I prefer to look at it as modernization of police. You know, back in the 1800s, we were riding horses. In the 1900s, we had Model Ts. Today, we have SUVs. But everything changes. You know, Tommy guns that the gangsters had in the 30s, everything changes. So we have to modernize with those same times. We can't be left behind when we have people who are capable of inflicting such harm upon our population that if we stop modernizing our own forces, our own service, then we're going to be behind. And what happens when that tragic event occurs? Nobody expects that in Tacoma Park something tragic will happen. But nobody expected in Pennsylvania for somebody to go into an Amish school. Nobody expected up in Connecticut at Sandy Hook for somebody to go into a school, an elementary school. Nobody expects these things to happen. But we as an organization, as a city, have to be prepared for it. What are we doing for our citizens? What are we doing for our officers? What are we doing to make sure that we're prepared to deal with that crisis when it happens to us? And that's their purpose.
One other question on
Yes,
this.
ma'am.
It has been said to me, you know, we've talked, and I've talked about this on the city council, the difference between the warrior model of policing and guardian model.
Yes, ma'am.
And the idea that having the ERT as a something as the acting city manager said, as something that people would come to, an attraction. It has been said to me that is an attraction for folks who feel the warrior model of policing. And if we're wanting to move towards and think of our police department more as guardians of safety and rights and all those things in our community, is that really the direction we should go in our police department?
I don't think that the officers see themselves as warriors. I think they see themselves as guardians, as protectors. The people that join those types of services, they don't do it because they want to see their name in lights. They don't do it because somebody's going to make a movie about them. Most of the time, they don't want their name known. They do it because they are dedicated to service to others, whether it be protecting citizens, providing an extra service to their own brothers and sisters in law enforcement. They do it for the love of what they do because they're here to help and here to protect people. That's why they're doing it. I'll point out Officer Kyle Hanlon. The guy's karaokeing in a restaurant. I mean, is that a warrior and then he's one of our team members. So the guys that are on the team, they don't see themselves as soldiers. Most of them don't have any military experience. As a matter of fact, I think only 2 of them have military experience. Officer Sims was in the Air Force and Officer Godlewski was in the Army. The rest of us were civilians. You know, we're not warriors. We see ourselves as protectors, as guardians. Most of the members have kids, wives, families. They're not here to be on a movie screen or any of those kind of things or be John Rambo. They're here for the love of what they do.
And I don't. Just to add to that, I certainly don't think that they're mutually exclusive. The potential recruits who are interested in a special unit. I don't want to make a generalization, but many of them might be interested in the opportunities afforded through some of the trainings for a special unit. I mean, there are tactical operations, negotiations. There are trainings associated with mental health.
I'm doing this all in just to say that these are just conversations that I would like to have.
Absolutely.
And I will say that in the past, when I have asked these questions, I have gotten very different responses from the person who would stand at that podium. So I'm saying that I'm asking these questions again about our police department now.
I can only speak for myself.
Exactly, and that's why I'm asking the questions tonight.
And I think that we're always available to anybody who has questions, obviously with the city manager's approval. If you have questions about anything we do, please feel free. Nothing is a secret in what we do, how we operate. I mean, there may be some things that are tactical or operational details that we're not privy to the public. But there's how we operate, what we do. If you want to come to training one day, the guys would love to have you come out to training. I'm serious. They would love to have you come. We have in-service if you want to attend. You're more than welcome to attend our in-service. When we have command staff meetings, I don't see why any of you wouldn't. There's some things maybe. But generally speaking, if you'd like to come to one of our CompStat meetings, there's no reason. Well, communication and openness is what we strive for. Transparency in what we do. We won't earn anyone's trust if we're a closed shop. The only way we're going to earn your all's trust back is through open, transparent communications with you. And that's what we intend to do.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Councilmember Siemens, did you have more to add?
Just one thing, I remembered
Yes,
the question I was going to ask, and you had talked about working with Laurel.
Yes, sir.
And you'd also mentioned training with them. Why don't we work with Montgomery County or train with Montgomery County?
So that's sort of a delicate answer, but I'll give you the best answer I can. We have reached out to Montgomery County in the past. Their policy internally is that if you do not attend their basic school, you cannot train or work with them. We have not been afforded an opportunity to attend their basic school. We have attended basic schools offered by Prince George's County, Anne Arundel County, Howard County, Calvert County, Harford County, but we have not been afforded an opportunity to go there. We've reached out to them on several occasions, and they're a good group of people, but they have their own policies, and so that's sort of where we are with that.
So we've tried to go to their basic school?
Yes, sir.
And how about Prince George's County?
We've attended Prince George's County's basic school. We have relationships with Prince George's County ERT, Howard County, Laurel City, a number of other county ERTs that we've done training with. We've attended their basic training schools, and we've had relationships with those teams.
And we still have the mutual aid agreement with Montgomery County that we could call them if we wanted, but we just couldn't work with them.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Okay. All right. Are we done? All right. Thank you again. I very much appreciate all of you being here so late this evening, and more to come. Thank you. Are adjourned.
Okay, everybody out there, this is Pat Loveless, your official peace delegate, and I'm coming to you with a few words of peace. I want to tell everybody out there that people must know, school is getting ready to get out. So the kids should be asking everything, what can the school do for me, but what can I do for my school? And what can I do for my education? The parents should be asking the same thing too. And once school is out, there'll be a lot of children running around here. We got to do our best to keep them out of mischief and out of gangs. Because you got to remember, they're at their most impressionable years now. And it's the best time to teach them right from wrong. And teach them that we can have a good society if we want one. You got to watch the toys your kids play with, those toy guns. They teach you at a very young age that it's okay to solve your differences by shooting somebody. Playing guns and cops